While speaking on the phone, learns he needs to stay composed and listen carefully as the conversation reveals news about his parents passing. The boy lay motionless before a looming truck, his awareness slipping away while a sense lingered that maybe fate had orchestrated it all. The initial emotion that washed over him wasn't terror at dying or a sense of peace, but rather a slight regret whose cause he couldn't quite identify. Alongside that, he experienced a small measure of self-pity, realizing that tomorrow was supposed to mark his 20th birthday. He found himself transported to a strange new land where unexpected adventures awaited him, and he encountered the mysterious phenomenon known as magic. He battled a female opponent with his sword and confronted several other adversaries as well. He had actually faced numerous opponents in combat. However, the full account of his journey would be revealed when the moment was right. The concept of reincarnation was supposed to feel like pure fantasy. The characters appeared to address the audience, acknowledging those who were following their journey through the story. For him, however, the experience felt completely genuine. Inside a room painted entirely in white, the boy's face seemed to merge with his own reflection, creating an uncanny connection between the two. Found himself bewildered when a mysterious voice inquired if that was his name. Upon confirming his identity, the voice remarked on the scarcity of visitors and informed him that he had perished in an accident. The unseen man elaborated, explaining that in uncommon circumstances, people from this world were either reborn or transported to different worlds after their deaths. This phenomenon, referred to as on their planet, had selected as its latest participant. Although still struggled to understand, the man assured him that the offer was straightforward. Could begin a new life in another world, retaining all of his current memories. The boy, taken aback by this revelation, likened the experience to reincarnation. As the boy takes in the surprising revelation that magic once existed on Earth, the angel began preparations to introduce the boy to a new world. A glowing globe materialized before him as an announcement revealed the world's name. 5. Beaming, the angel shared that only 1 out of every 5 people possessed magical abilities, and that would be gifted with water magic. Hearing this, felt let down and wondered aloud if he could switch his magic to fire or earth, but False Michael informed him that such changes were impossible. The angel explained that magical aptitudes were gifts from the gods, assigned at birth in the new world, and these abilities would remain constant throughout life. Still upset, questioned if he would be limited to water magic forever. The angel, smiling gently, reassured him that he would benefit more by concentrating on his water-based spells. He went on to describe how the boy's strength and agility exceeded what was typical for his age. In Phi, he clarified, advancement depended not on levels or special skills, but on effort and determination. Curious, the boy wanted to know what steps he could take to become stronger both physically and magically. On both Earth and Phi, people can enhance their physical strength through regular exercise and persistent training. The angel concluded his message by assuring that personal growth would come if he committed himself to self-improvement. Feeling uneasy, realized that only by working extremely hard could he hope to succeed in this unfamiliar land. According to the narrator, once a few more details were clarified, False Michael finally turned the conversation to what wished to pursue. With excitement, expressed his desire to lead a calm and quiet life somewhere far away from others. The angel, beaming, told him that his new life would begin in the Rondo forest. He planned to leave enough food to last 2 months and advised him to make full use of the 100-meter barrier surrounding the house, because he would eventually need to master his magic for activities like hunting. The angel also mentioned that a beach lay to the southwest of the house, where could someday harvest salt from the sea once his water magic improved. Only then did realize he hadn't asked the most crucial question. He turned toward the angel, seeking guidance on how to actually use magic. The angel, who called himself Michael, explained that practicing magic required vivid imagination and persistent effort, assuring that everyone started out inexperienced. Determined, promised to work hard and expressed his gratitude for all the angel's advice. In what seemed like an instant, slowly comes to consciousness, realizing he is lying in a bed. The boy slowly rises from his bed, finding himself inside a simple, old-fashioned cabin. As he stands and steps out of the room, he observes that the cabin resembles something built during medieval times and appears far from new. Once outside, he spots a coarse wooden table holding 2 books and surrounded by a few chairs. Choosing not to pay attention to the books, he decides to look around the rest of the cabin. In another room, he comes across a bathtub, which reminds him that the ancient Romans once used public baths. Enjoyed the solitude of the bath, feeling grateful for the chance to relax alone. He suspected that False Michael had prepared it for him, perhaps because he was Japanese, but he still hadn't figured out whether the angel was male or female. After soaking for a while, he suddenly remembered the books he had seen on the table and decided to examine them. When he returned, he found that one book contained information about various monsters, while the other focused on the local flora. He also noticed a note from False Michael explaining that food was stored in the silo outside, which doubled as a freezer, confirming suspicion that the angel could read minds. Acknowledged to himself that he lacked any appraisal abilities, a typical trait in. Stepping out of the cabin, he found himself in awe of the immense landscape that stretched before him. The vast, open landscape revealed its breathtaking beauty, stretching out beneath a distant range of mountains. As he gazed at those far-off peaks, he speculated that such wild places might be home to dragons and other dangerous creatures, making them best avoided. While taking in the scenery, it suddenly dawned on him that he truly existed in an entirely different world. At the same time, false Michael found himself wishing for a day when he could possess a real body and enjoy a tranquil existence, much like the one now experienced. Shortly after, he realized he had neglected to inform about the impressive strength of his magic even by his remarkable standards. The angel believed that would eventually discover this on his own, as he could only rely on his water magic. Recalling how false Michael had advised him to picture the spell in his mind and keep practicing it, the boy, intent on the thought of water, shut his eyes in concentration. When he opened them again, he was startled to find shimmering bubbles of water floating above his hands. It dawned on him that this was the first time he had ever performed magic. As he recalled the teachings of false Michael, he watched the fragile bubble of water slip from his grasp and tumble to the earth. He realized that spoken incantations were unnecessary, leading him to question whether the physical laws of this world matched those he once knew. The boy's thoughts drifted to the angel's warning about the barrier, reminding him that thorough preparation for battle was essential before venturing past its invisible edge. In truth, the barrier's protection extended only 100 meters. Battling a wild boar on Earth with nothing more than a basic knife would be unthinkable, making the idea of confronting monsters or seem utterly hopeless. With that realization, recognized that another weapon auction was his only remaining option. As he poured water into his bathing cell, he contemplated that mastering his magic depended on clearly picturing his desired outcome in his imagination. Lost in contemplation, he pictured the concept of hydrogen bonding in his mind, knowing that grasping how his desired creation functioned would allow him to bring it to life through imagination alone. Through this process, he succeeded in forming a delicate layer of ice, as well as heating and melting water at will. Without warning, he crumples onto the bathroom tiles. Overcome with fatigue, he comes to understand that he has completely used up his magical energy. This happens on the 5th day. Dawn's world prepared a rabbit leg for his breakfast. When he stopped by the silo, he discovered that false Michael had left him only salt as seasoning, along with a mysterious magic that preserved the food in a frozen state. Over time, had become skilled at thawing and cooking the meat with impressive results. In addition to preparing his meals, he was required to study the books the angel had given him. Although they were meant for beginners, their pages were filled with challenging and extensive content. As he ate and read, the boy realized he needed to learn how to heal himself, craft antidotes, and start fires without relying on a single drop of water. The world was bathed in the golden glow of the setting sun. Before drifting off to sleep, and at several points throughout the day, he practiced forming and melting ice, hoping to sharpen his magical abilities. Each time he repeated this process, he noted his progress. He could now create ice in just 5 seconds, though making it fly was still beyond him. Strangely, any water he summoned would always lift into the air with ease. Throughout the day, searched for useful ingredients within the safety of the barrier and pushed himself with long runs, working. At night, he practiced his magic without rest, mastering skills such as forming ice and making water vanish into thin air. Each day, the boy continued his rigorous training, never missing a session. Now, on his 13th day in, he stood prepared with a unique weapon, a knife frozen onto a sturdy stick. In one hand, he marveled at the magical orbs of water swirling at his command. In the other, he gripped the makeshift spear, feeling a sense of pride in what he had achieved with his magic so far. He pondered a fitting title for this new technique and eventually settled on Ice Spear, though he still hadn't mastered sending the ice flying through the air. That morning, he set his sights on 2 clear objectives, searching for detoxifying herbs and finding a rock suitable for sparking a fire. The group decided to travel southwest, trusting the information from the person pretending to be Michael, who mentioned a beach in that direction. The figure navigates the shadowy forest, carefully stepping over scattered stones and weaving around various barriers. As he stepped out of the shadowy woods, he found himself taken aback by the breathtaking landscape unfolding in front of him. A beautiful river unfolded before him, filling his view beneath the bright sunlight. The breathtaking scenery left him in awe as he approached the water and made up his mind to climb down from the mountain where he stood. While making his way downhill, the protagonist's eyes caught something unusual on the ground, prompting him to kneel and examine it closely. Upon closer inspection, he realized he had discovered quartz, a resource he'd hoped to find that day. He had never expected to stumble upon it with such little effort, and now he knew that lighting fires at home would be much easier from now on. He proceeds to stroll beside the river, taking in the sights as he moves forward. Believing that traveling northeast would always keep his home within sight to his left, he felt reassured that he could find his way back quickly if trouble appeared. As he pressed forward, his mind wandered to the terrifying creatures and he wondered whether he possessed the strength to overcome a few, though uncertainty lingered. His thoughts then shifted to his other mission, searching for detoxifying herbs, prompting him to mentally review any advice from the book that might help him identify them. Without warning, a noise erupts behind, catching his attention. As he glances over his shoulder, shock sweeps over him when he spots a smaller wild boar lurking nearby. The creature storms toward him with wild aggression, and fear surges through as he scrambles to move out of harm's way. The boar rapidly shortens the distance, forcing to hurl himself aside in a frantic effort to avoid being struck. Sprawled on the ground, he catches sight of the animal preparing for another assault. Still reeling and suffering from a leg injury, notices the boar charging once more. Pressing his palms to the earth, he triggers a slick sheet of ice to spread across the massive boar slid uncontrollably toward the fallen boy, only to be stopped when it slammed into the towering ice spears. At last, the exhausted boy collapsed onto the earth, feeling a wave of relief as the lifeless, impaled boar lay before him. Following this near-fatal encounter, made a significant change, gradually reducing his consumption of food stored in the silo. He later discovered that the monsters inhabiting this world possessed magical abilities, with their power increasing alongside their proficiency in magic. Recalled the warning from False Michael, who had told him that frequent use of magic would strengthen it over time, and that the monsters had practiced their abilities since the moment they were born, as learned to overcome. The boy discovers that a monster's ability to use magic depends on its species, and he realizes that the monsters living in Rondo Forest have eliminated all the ordinary animals that once lived there. Occasionally spots living animals scattered around, such as crocodiles that prey on others and nimble creatures like rabbits. Even so, predatory animals remain dangerous to humans, no matter how they compare to the monsters. In this world, the monsters hold so much power that they dominate the food chain. Introducing magic into the mix only made the situation even harder to handle. While watching the unfamiliar monster, recalls that the book had previously explained this type of creature to him. The beast, known as the horned bison, effortlessly destroyed its opponent. Enormous crocodiles not only relied on their sheer size, but also harnessed wind magic to turn their charges into deadly attacks. Without warning, an unforeseen object plummeted from above, striking the bison and severing its head from its body. Then approached the fallen creature at a measured pace, quietly admiring the effectiveness of his latest water magic technique, which he had named guillotine. As he drew closer, his attention was drawn to the sight of the bison's head rapidly being consumed by something lurking in the water. Observing more carefully, he was startled by the incredible speed at which the head was disappearing. It was then that he realized a fish, reminiscent of the piranhas found on Earth, had been. Gripped his sword firmly, his gaze fixed on the snake. Not even a hint of fear appeared on his face. The snake's tail vibrated with such intense sound that it sliced cleanly through the stone next to it, making the solid rock seem as fragile as a sheet of paper. It moved quickly, escaping from the place where death lingered behind. Steadied himself with swift precision, his mind already formulating a strategy for his next move. Encircled by shimmering water bubbles, the boy locked his gaze on the snake with unwavering concentration. Suddenly, a gentle rain descended upon both and his reptilian adversary. Brushed his hand through the air, channeling all his attention to the tiny beads of water surrounding the snake. In response, the snake lunged at him with deadly aggression, launching a savage and relentless assault. After focusing intently, he abruptly moves his hands and body, causing enormous spears of ice to form. A spear thrust sliced cleanly through the serpent's body, vanquishing the creature in an instant. The poisonous fluid that seeped from the wounded snake quickly broke down beneath the falling rain, unable to endure the scalding heat of the water. Still, not every beast could be defeated by simple tactics. Among these was the assassin eagle, a predator that harnessed wind magic and blinding supersonic speed to hunt its prey. As the fierce bird pursued him, sprinted at full speed, his heart pounding with every step. Suddenly the eagle hurtled toward the ground, landing with such force that was knocked aside by the shockwave. Regaining his footing, the young fighter his attack had landed close to the creature's eye, and he realized that a true strike to that spot might have brought down the beast, which was by far the most powerful opponent he had ever encountered. While concentrating on protecting himself, he believed his counterattack had kept him safe, yet he remained unaware of when another creature could suddenly emerge during the chaos of battle. The book about monsters, which False Michael had given him, was filled with fascinating information and thorough explanations of various creatures. Believing it to be just the first volume for beginners, he guessed there must also be versions for more experienced readers. Near the end of this beginner's guide, he discovered two unique pages, one featuring a picture of a dragon and the other showing an image of it. He belonged to a race of monsters that closely resembled humans. The exclusive pages had been created for individuals striving to reach the pinnacle of excellence, yet had never shared that ambition. Instead, he was never interested in achieving such ambitions. Instead, his only wish was to enjoy a quiet and uneventful existence. As he embraced this tranquil way of living, marked the end of his very first year in the unfamiliar world. On a night illuminated by the moon, the protagonist stood confronted by a figure that resembled a human. A full year had gone by since first set foot in the unfamiliar land known as. Above the lake nestled in the northern reaches of Rondo Forest, the moon climbed higher, nearing its highest point in the night sky. A headless warrior known as a suddenly materialized in front of him. The protagonist found themselves puzzled puzzled by the presence of the Headless Knight in Rondo Forest, unsure about his origins. It became clear that the Headless Knight's real power resided in his expert use of the sword. The absence of his name from the beginner's monster book suggested that he was either not classified as a monster or possessed a rank higher than beginner, since had chosen not to rely on magic, resolved to forego magic as well. Yet the knight's remarkable sword skills posed a formidable challenge. In addition to everything else, people claimed he was so confident that he insisted on training, regardless of whether agreed. After being slammed onto the ground and hurt, it seemed to them that this was exactly how it felt. After delivering 3 powerful blows that would have been deadly under normal circumstances, no one else remained. The knight turned away from the boy. Climbing onto his horse, the knight rode off, leaving the impression that he believed would improve in the future. The boy was left uncertain whether he couldn't tell if his strikes made any difference against the knight, as none of them managed to connect solidly. Each day, his determination became stronger. The first time he had faced defeat, it happened in the blink of an eye. Now, however, the outcome seemed poised to change. By that point, the fight had raged on for a full hour. Speed had increased, allowing him to read and predict the Meg's actions as they clashed. Despite his efforts, when he swung his ice sword to strike against the magician's blade, his weapon broke apart instantly and crumbled to pieces. He gazed at the Headless Knight, his eyes wide with astonishment. The knight struck with such force that was thrown through the air, landing several meters from where he had stood. The protagonist lay hurt on the ground, but he found some comfort in knowing he had managed to score 3 hits that day. Rose to his feet while the knight stood motionless before him, as though anticipating something. Suddenly, the knight unsheathed his sword and rested his hand atop the blade, causing it to shine with a brilliant light. The weapon began to shift, growing larger and altering its form entirely. Without a word, the knight offered the newly transformed sword to, then climbed onto his horse and rode away, leaving alone with his gift. Still kneeling and clutching the sword, believed this was a present, passed down from master to student. He realized that owning this weapon meant he needed to push himself even further. After his showdown with the assassin eagle, understood his purpose, to keep growing stronger. As he continued his training, each blow made him stronger and faster than before. During their next clash with the assassin eagle, the creature returned accompanied by its mate. In their earlier confrontation, the eagle had suffered the loss of an eye after getting too close. Now, it repeated that error. As the fight went on, the boy began to tire from constantly evading the assault from both birds, but he had foreseen this situation. By cleverly adapting his magic, he successfully evaded the second unexpected assault from the eagle. The one-eyed assassin known as Eagle was taken by surprise when its ally was defeated in an instant, prompting it to turn and escape without hesitation. Remembered how the eagle had nearly killed him twice, making it the first adversary to push him to the brink of death more than once. He recalled that he had faced the possibility of dying before, and had come to terms with it on those occasions. He experienced an unusual sensation when he encountered the eagle with only one eye. This encounter would be their third and last, signaling the end of their meetings. The eagle stood before him, presenting itself in a way that contrasted sharply with how it had looked during their previous 2 meetings. Upon examining the object, the boys noticed that it had grown significantly in size and darkness, now enveloped by a shadowy black aura. The eagle launched itself with incredible speed, forcing him to react quickly just in time to avoid being struck. As he lay sprawled on the ground, he recalled that it had employed this very tactic during their initial encounter. After being struck by the creature's attack, he became convinced it was the identical monster he had faced before, though it had grown more powerful. The intense clash raged on, and the young fighter fought desperately to protect himself, quickly noticing the eagle's newfound strength. In the midst of their struggle, the sinister foe broke ice armor apart while frantically worked to mend it. Without warning, he realized his magic no longer responded to his will, leaving him vulnerable as the eagle swooped toward him once more. In a desperate move, he managed to form a sword just in time. He narrowly avoided the strike, but fatigue was starting to weigh him down. As his strength waned, he wondered if the sinister force was somehow suppressing his magical abilities. A piercing shriek erupted from the villain before it unleashed a wide-reaching lightning spell that crackled through the space in front of. Avoiding the strike of lightning unleashed by during the attack, he loses control of his spear. Noticing this vulnerability, the eagle gets ready to strike again. Now gripping his newly acquired sword, wondered if he could harness magical energy through its blade. As the intense battle neared its end, he and his opponent locked eyes one last time, each sensing the determination in the other. With swift precision, Reel drives his weapon through the eagle's throat, causing the powerful bird to weaken rapidly. Gazed into the eagle's sharp, alert eye, and indicated through his expression that he grasped its meaning. Despite losing both its companion and one of its eyes, it continued to fight with all its strength until it was finally overcome. He went on to explain that meeting her had helped him mature and gain strength, expressing his gratitude for the experience. He acknowledged her courage, recognizing the remarkable incredible growth she had demonstrated and expressed his admiration for her transformation. He considered it a privilege to strike the decisive blow. After withdrawing his blade from the creature's neck, ensured its end was certain. The following morning, he returned to the site where his clash with the one-eyed assassin, Eagle, had taken place. As he surveyed the scattered evidence of their struggle, a sense of genuine triumph finally settled over him. W experienced no sense of accomplishment from it. As the boys remained in place, something unfolded. The scene unfolded as something appeared before him, capturing his full attention and leaving his mind blank to everything else. At that moment, an enormous drive-in appeared right before his eyes. The dragon paused in front of the hero, reaching out with its mind to see if this was the way humans experience telepathic communication. The entity went on to explain that it had not interacted with a human in quite some time, and wondered aloud whether any human was able to hear its voice. Still gripped by fear, suddenly senses the dragon's voice echoing inside his mind. The dragon appears satisfied that can finally hear it, clarifying that it is indeed the creature standing before him. Confused, wonders silently if this is some form of telepathy, and he mentally apologizes for his earlier shock, assuring the dragon that he can understand it now. The dragon then inquires if has seen a particular bird in the area, one that has evolved from an assassin eagle. Immediately realizes he is quite familiar with that bird. Without hesitation, he quickly apologizes, just in case the bird had caused any trouble. The mighty beast considered whether the bird had been one of the dragon's followers before questioning if the creature was responsible for her death. In response, the dragon clarified that she had never served him, and explained his interest stemmed from the sudden disappearance of the bird's presence in the area. He explained that it would be reasonable to think another dragon might have swallowed the bird, so he left the mountain and went down to investigate. Despite a lingering trace of fear in his expression, the protagonist admits that he was responsible for slaying the one-eyed assassin eagle. The beast reacts with surprise, but quickly assures him that it is acceptable, expressing contentment over the eagle's absence. He went on to clarify that this bird was the first to evolve in the forest in hundreds of years, and wondered aloud if she had been holding back the boy's magical abilities. Quickly confirms that she had experienced it herself. He admits that he could hardly accept being unable to use his magic, describing the feeling as if someone had taken away his privileges as a mage. Observing closely, the dragon remarks that it appears is burdened with something unusual. He soon realizes the weapon belongs to the Fairy King, yet explains that a headless knight at the northern lake gave it to him. The creature agrees, revealing that the knight is actually the Water Fairy King who lives in the forest. Goes on to mention that he is a water mage, and that the sword had rescued him just the previous day. The dragon explained that the king's fondness for the boy was the reason he was chosen to learn magic from him. However, the boy hurriedly insisting that he was not studying magic with the Water Fairy King. He explains that he has been practicing sword fighting alongside the king, and has never witnessed the king using any magic. The dragon, puzzled by this, remarks on how unusual it is for him to be studying swordsmanship. He believes that if the king is sharing water magic, it must be because the boy truly needs it. He also thinks the Water Fairy King might be fond of the boy, since they seem to have something in common. The dragon had existed for countless millennia. Noticing a chance, approached and respectfully requested permission to ask the dragon some questions. The ancient creature agreed without hesitation. Taking this as his cue, the boy started by mentioning his curiosity about the Rondo Forest, wanting to learn details such as how large it was and what sort of place it might be. He goes on to reveal that the Rondo Forest was once known as the Rondo Subcontinent because of its vast size, comparable to that of a small continent. He further mentions that this enormous landmass is bordered by water on all sides except for the northern region. A ring of mountains surrounds the land. The dragon then explains that, to his knowledge, is the sole human living anywhere on the Rondo Subcontinent. This revelation stuns. He had wished for a life of tranquility and solitude, but he never expected to be this completely alone. The beast, caught off guard, insisted that such a thing couldn't be true, explaining that he had always lived that way, and demanded to know the boy's origins. Without pausing, revealed that he had been born again into this life. He had arrived from a different world, and was aware that others had made the same journey. Without warning, the noise of battle thundered through the air. The loud noise vibrated through the air, causing both the dragon and the boy to jump in surprise. After a moment, the dragon shut his eyes and focused on the sound, letting the roar fill his senses, while remained motionless as if he had turned to stone. The dragon then starts to depart, mentioning that although the dragon was being summoned away, he assured that their paths would cross again someday. In a moment of urgency, pleaded to know the dragon's name and quickly introduced himself. The dragon revealed his name and cautioned to avoid the eastern mountains, explaining that the dragons living there might attack without warning. The dragon suddenly launches into the sky with incredible force, surpassing the speed of sound without any effort. The hero stands rooted to the spot, completely mesmerized by the dragon's astonishing power. The character soared through the sky, rapidly disappearing into the distance at a speed faster than sound. As the dust settled around him, the boy, overcome by the sheer force he had just witnessed, acknowledged to himself the astonishing might of dragons. After a while, reached the spot where his rescue had taken place. After being summoned, he observed with curiosity, finding his behavior unusual. Doubts began to surface in his mind, making him question whether was truly human or possibly a more advanced or altered form of their kind. Recalling the tale the boy had shared, the dragon reflected that nothing in his long existence had matched its uniqueness, finding the story truly captivating. The dragon realized that, despite living for centuries, there remained countless mysteries in the world, and he looked forward to watching the boy and discovering more. Observed his reflection in the surface of the water, and realized that he looked exactly the same as he always had. Not a single sign of aging appeared on his face. Occasionally, he noticed that his hair would grow out much longer than before. He trims it the same way he trims his nails, since those also tend to grow from time to time. As he soaked in the bath, he realized that his height and face remained the same. Deciding not to dwell on it, he made up his mind to search for fish indoors later that day. After sprinkling salt, he let his thoughts drift away in the comfort of a warm morning bath. Later, when he arrived at the shore, observed the sand littered with fragments of wood. His attention was suddenly drawn to something unusual among the debris, prompting him to dash toward it. As he approached, the idea of a shipwreck began to form in his mind, especially since only 3 figures were visible on the beach. He examined the first man and determined that life had left him long ago. Looking farther away, spotted another man impaled by a wooden plank, and he quickly recognized that this person was beyond help as well. Nearby, he discovered a third man clad in armor sprawled on the sand. Approaching, realizes that abandoning the man would mean certain death from blood loss, and feels compelled to offer some form of aid. Focusing intently on the injury, he gathers his thoughts and begins searching for a way to apply his water magic to the situation. As he sifted through his memories, he remembered learning that the human body consists mostly of water, about 60%. This realization made him think that, as a mage with power over water, he ought to have the ability to control it. Blood pooled around him. Channeling all his concentration, he searched intently until he located where the bleeding started and attempted to stop it. With considerable strain, he successfully draws water to the injured man's wound, using it to halt the flow of blood. At first, the man's wounds continued to pour out blood. When the bleeding eventually slowed, experienced a surge of pride, realizing he had managed to assist the man in some way. He gently raised the armored figure from the scorching sand and cradled him in his arms. Not long after, he spotted a cart hidden among the debris and carefully set the man inside, allowing for easier movement. A while later, the armored man opened his eyes in confusion, realizing he was somewhere unfamiliar. Rising to his feet, he realizes that he is inside a house with a ceiling set unusually low. The building stood impressively large, leading her to speculate that it could possibly belong to the mayor. As he moves through the village, something to his right draws his eye. Resting against the wall next to him are his sword and armor, carefully placed where he can easily reach them. The man stepped outside the house and noticed carrying a bundle of firewood. Without hesitation, he introduced himself as Abel and inquired whether was the person responsible for his rescue. He quickly expressed his gratitude to the boy for saving his life, responded by saying it was He found Abel lying on the beach and simply brought him back to his own home. He explained that out of the 3 people stranded on the sand, he managed to rescue only one. Abel reassured him, mentioning that it was all right since the others had been smugglers. Paused his actions and faced Abel, his curiosity evident as he wanted to confirm whether they had truly been smugglers. Protagonist begins to suspect that Abel might be involved in smuggling as well, simply because they were seen together. However, he hesitates to accept this idea, since Abel doesn't give off the impression of someone who would do something wrong. While pondering the situation, the boy notices that they are communicating smoothly. This observation leads him to conclude that Abel is likely not speaking Japanese, and he silently acknowledges that false Michael successfully bridged the language gap between them. A warm smile spread across his face as he approached Abel and offered a friendly introduction, quickly following it by inviting Abel to share a meal. Abel, still reeling from the events, was urged to eat, as it was assumed he must be hungry. While Abel remained in a state of disbelief, he overheard the boy mention that he had hung up his clothes, which should have dried by now. Returning to the beach, pointed out the place where Abel's 2 companions had once been. As they wondered about the fate of the missing men, remarked on Abel's good fortune, while Abel asked the boy to speak less formally. Explained that speaking politely to elders was his custom, but Abel insisted he preferred a more relaxed way of talking, as friends might do. In the quiet that followed, considered the possibility that he had just made his. Several moments slipped by in silence as gave no reply, prompting the man to wave his hand in front of his face in an effort to catch his attention. Later, inside the boy's cabin, the man expresses regret for his earlier actions. The man suddenly brought up the offer, describing it as a job opportunity and suggesting that could serve as a guide. He went on to mention that he would pay and offer support if was interested in experiencing city life. Wiping sweat from his brow, the man then inquired about thoughts on the matter. After considering the proposal, agreed, but explained that he needed to wait until the next morning to leave, as he still had some unfinished business. Abel happy expressed his gratitude to the boy for accompanying him. Once finished cleaning up after dinner, he let the man know he was heading out for a bit and promised to return soon. He steps out of the cabin, mentioning his need to inform someone about his absence. He tells Abel to wait for him, noting that it could be some time before he returns. The man began to reply, and at that moment, the headless companion and his lifeless body appeared before the hero, silently awaiting him. The boy, facing the man, announced his plans to depart from the forest the following day, explaining that tonight's training session would be their final one until he came back from his journey. The knight lingered with a quiet, patient presence, as tangible as any reality. He raises the sword that had been given to him and directs its blade toward the warrior. Bracing himself, the young hero makes it clear that he expects this training session to be different from all the rest. He urges the knight to attack with his full strength, holding nothing back. At the same time, under the gentle glow of candlelight, Abel pondered who had mentioned he would notify. Because no one else lived nearby, he assumed was by himself, though it crossed his mind that might have come with another person to pay respects at a grave, a topic he chose not to investigate further. Although lacked knowledge about the location of the city of Loon, he mentioned it lay far to the north and found himself questioning the reason behind his own statement. He also thinks about how difficult it would be to venture out by himself, especially since he has no idea how vast the forest might be. Finishing his thoughts, he concluded that, lacking his staff, was likely not skilled in combat as a mage. He decided that once they arrived in the city, he would assist by providing him with clothing and other necessities. The hero stood exhausted and drenched in sweat, gripping a sword that was thrust into the floor, clearly worn out from an intense training session. A knight without a head stood before, suddenly noticed a slight movement coming from the armored figure. The knight extended an object toward him, causing to wonder about its purpose. The noble, headless knight remained silent, standing tall and dignified before, offering no explanation. Later, Abel expressed that he did not want to be impolite to, and reassured him that he was not obligated to respond if he did not wish to. Abel then inquired about whereabouts the previous night, replied that he had gone to tell his master about his upcoming adventure while putting on a newly received hooded cloak. He explained to Abel that the cloak was a parting gift. When Abel, back at his cabin, the hero took one last, quiet look around, his eyes filled with memories as he silently said goodbye to the place he once called home. As the morning unfolded, the group traveled across the landscape, moving northward without meeting any creatures. However, by the time afternoon arrived, an event disrupted their journey. A young boar suddenly blocked their way, causing Abel to tense with anticipation. Without wasting a moment, he unsheathed his blade and rushed toward the beast. In one swift, accurate motion, the fighter pierced the little boar, bringing the battle to a rapid close. Astonished, the protagonist stared at his companion, his eyes wide with disbelief. Observing the uncertainty in the warrior's gaze, clarified that whenever Abel activated a combat skill, certain parts of his body emitted a faint light, and his movements would shift noticeably during these moments. The warrior clarified that such combat abilities were typical for fighters who wielded weapons. He also suggested that their priority should be securing a suitable campsite, since Mag was on the way. He noted that they were getting closer. He pointed out a massive tree with a hollow center, suggesting it would make an excellent campsite. He added that the tree might even be able to consume the boar. With the campsite already arranged inside the tree, Abel announced that he would rest first, yet instructed the hero to wake him without hesitation if anything unusual occurred. The warrior stretches out and settles in for sleep, preparing to recover his strength. Meanwhile, remains seated by the campfire, lost in contemplation. A troubling idea crosses his mind. He wonders if he has already died. With extra time on his hands, he decided to focus on mastering his magical abilities. Throughout the night, he kept his vigil, noticing how the darkness settled and the world around him became more peaceful as the hours slipped by. Several hours passed before Abel regained consciousness. Upon waking, he insisted that the hero take a break and allow him to stand guard for a while. The man's gaze settled on the rabbit that the protagonist had successfully caught earlier. As he looked over the catch, he found himself doubting his techniques at first, but soon realized they were both practical and successful. As lay there, it became clear to him that the cloak's craftsmanship was beyond human ability, leaving him to ponder the mysterious nature of Mentor. Abel considered the possibility that the boy's master was a spirit, but then dismissed the idea, reasoning that spirits wouldn't offer tangible presents like cloaks. This led led him to suspect the master might actually be a figure from legend. He saw that the being resembled a dragon. He felt confident that the cloak could not have been crafted by human hands, leading him to believe that the boy's master might still be a spirit. Shivering from the cold, Abel doubts that it could be the same people once more. Moments after, he awakens and offers a morning greeting to the warrior. The heroes pressed onward, determined to pursue their adventure. Moving closer to their objective, Abel advanced with his sword at the ready, as trailed behind him, attentively studying the surrounding plants. Without warning, an object plummeted from the sky, landing to the right of the warrior and causing both individuals to jump in surprise. Abel gripped his sword tightly, suspecting that an invisible threat or a hidden enemy might be nearby. As he glanced upward, the group spotted a deadly eagle soaring above them. Realizing the danger, the protagonist alerted the warrior that this fierce creature relied on air-based magic to strike from afar. The warrior proposes falling back, yet points out that a wild boar is hot on their trail and mysterious creatures block their path. With danger closing in from every direction, makes it clear that running away is impossible. They question whether they have stumbled into a trap. However, the hero assures everyone that it is nothing more than a mere coincidence. The group notices that the open field appears to serve as the hunting ground for the killer eagle, leaving them uncertain about their next move. Suggests that they should confront their enemies in the clearing, offering to deal with the killer eagle himself, while his companion focuses on the wild boar. Abel, feeling concerned, cautioned the boy that the eagle's swift attacks from above were powerful enough to endanger even skilled fighters like himself if they let their guard down. The protagonist, confident in his abilities as an ice mage, believed his defensive skills would protect him, and thought that warriors usually struggled more when facing opponents that could fly. The warrior agrees without hesitation, moving ahead and getting ready to fight. As he moves, he assures that he'll be back once the wild boar is taken care of, warning him to stay alive until then. Meanwhile, the hero cautions Abel to remain calm, reminding him that losing his composure could lead to injury. The warrior charged at the boar, his mind filled with curiosity about how had managed to sense the creature from such a great distance. The boar summoned the power of nearby stones, hurling them through the air in a relentless magical assault aimed at the warrior. With swift reflexes and practiced movements, the warrior evaded each incoming projectile, weaving expertly between the flying rocks. As soon as he closed the distance, he struck decisively, bringing his blade down upon the boar. After the battle, he his sword from the fallen creature's body. Exhausted, the warrior knelt, thrusting his sword into the earth and fighting to catch his breath. At the same time, he realized that he had relied on his powers too much and too fast in the battle, and now exhaustion was starting to overwhelm him. He realized that he must regain his strength quickly, as depended on him now. Hoisting the fallen boar over his shoulder, he made his way back to the place where waited with the killer eagle. Upon returning, he witnessed the killer eagle sprawled on the ground, with standing nearby, beaming at the sight of the defeated beast. Overwhelmed by disbelief, the warrior stared at, silently questioning whether the boy had truly vanquished the monster. Sprite's smile confirmed that he had, and he also explained that the remaining monsters had fled. The shock left Abel dropping to his knees, and immediately asked if Abel was injured. Observing the aftermath of battle, he claims that he's simply feeling a bit worn out. Abel quickly inquires about the way was able to avoid the attacker, as Abel explained that magical assaults carried out with invisible air were nearly impossible to avoid by relying on vision alone, requested that he turn and look at him. Intrigued, Abel shifted his attention toward the young hero. At that moment, the seasoned fighter detected a slender barrier of ice and reached out to touch its surface. Pointed out that the barrier was almost impossible to detect, and the warrior agreed, noting that it was nearly invisible. As Abel observed the scene, he realized that the killer eagle had essentially brought about its own defeat by crashing into a barely perceptible wall of ice. The warrior reflected on his experiences, mentioning that while he was familiar with many mages who controlled air, fire, and earth, an elderly man once told him that water mages rarely engaged in combat, a belief the warrior now expected to see disproven. With a grin, the protagonist turned to Abel, silently asking what had just happened. Abel quickly dismissed the inquiry, claiming he was simply thinking out loud. Both then lifted their eyes toward the mountain, unsettled by them. Abel soon observed an oddity in its actions, prompting him to question whether something was wrong with the coin. Admitted that he had never encountered money before. Curious, he requested permission to examine the coin more closely, and Abel immediately agreed. Abel began outlining the basics of the coin-based economy in this world, which likened to the systems used on 19th century Earth. Then inquired about the number of countries present in this world. Recalling from memory, Abel listed 3 primary territories: the Kingdom of Nightly, the Empire of, and the Federation of. As Abel continued, he became aware of an unusual presence nearby. He stated that they appeared to be inside. The hero reached forward, concentrating intently on his recently learned spell. In an instant, 10 massive ice barriers crashed down onto every golem nearby, shaking the ground with a noise as powerful as an earthquake. Wearing a playful smile, the hero made a light-hearted remark, suggesting that this was the true definition of a weapon of mass destruction. After securing the area, the group spotted a sizable, dark yellow magic stone lying nearby. Someone clarified that these stones' worth depended on both their size and their color. Expressed satisfaction at gaining a trophy from the battle, then generously offered the magic stone to Abel. Taken aback but accepting, Abel agreed to keep the prize for himself. At the same time, realized that the strategy he'd used against the monsters hadn't produced the expected results. Abel remarked that, if not for Sin's intervention, they wouldn't have survived, admitting he hadn't even known about collecting magic stones, something acknowledged in agreement. After a while, spotted something unusual to his right and asked Abel about it. The hero's attention is drawn to a movement far away. He spots shapes soaring through the air and suspects they could be dragons. As the figures approach, the group discerns that these creatures are actually wyverns, not dragons as first thought. Both heroes soon understand that the wyverns are not coming for them, but are instead targeting the behemoth. Excitement surges through at the realization that he is about to watch a clash between powerful monsters. He observes that the giant creature faces overwhelming odds, with 6 wyverns preparing to strike. Suddenly, one of the airborne predators lets out a piercing cry and sends a powerful blast of wind straight at the behemoth. Witnessing this, the group can hardly believe the ferocity of the assault and anxiously wonders how the massive beast will respond. Without moving an inch, the behemoth channels its stone magic, calling forth enormous rocks that rise up to form a protective barrier around its body. Next, the scene reveals the wyvern's attack surging toward one of these newly formed stone shields. The violent winds from the wyverns slam into the rocky defenses, completely shielding the behemoth from harm. Without hesitation, they unleashed a fresh barrage of wind-based assaults toward the beast. The massive creature conjured a ring of colossal stone barriers to shield itself. Shocked by this sudden defense, both the heroes and the wyverns gazed in disbelief at the towering stones encircling the enormous beast. Abel recalled hearing about behemoths before, but he had never realized they were capable of wielding magic, while the main hero had anticipated a fierce fight, yet hadn't expected to face magical abilities. The hovering monsters circled the newly raised stone barricade, waiting quietly as the land beast protected itself. With a deafening roar, the behemoth shattered its own stone walls and fixed its gaze directly on the wyverns. At that moment, both the airborne creatures and the heroes sensed something unusual was happening. Abel wondered aloud if the creature known as Behemoth had managed to immobilize the wyverns from every side, but expressed strong skepticism about that possibility. The massive creature unleashed another deep, rumbling roar that sent tremors through the earth and terrified everyone nearby. While the wyverns flailed helplessly on the ground, recalled witnessing a similar event before. He suspected that magic nullification might be at play. Abel, visibly startled, wondered if such a thing was even possible, since he had never encountered a human, much less a monster with that ability. Encouraged him to observe more carefully. The young boy then indicated that the winged beasts were attempting to stand but remained unable to do so, explaining that if they were truly paralyzed, they would be completely immobile. Abel struggled to comprehend the scene before him. Suddenly, he remembered hearing about traps like this. While the behemoth crushes the wyverns beneath its massive feet, the warrior turns to the hero and inquires about his interest in dungeons, to which the hero quickly agrees. As the monstrous creature defeats the last of the wyverns, Abel remarks that is fortunate, since Loon possesses the sole dungeon found in the central provinces. The boy expressed his frustration that the warrior hadn't mentioned this sooner, but the warrior insisted he was unaware of how much enjoyed exploring dungeons. As they moved forward, they discussed the frightening battle they'd just witnessed and speculated about how intense a clash between Abel and the behemoth could become. Soon after, they observed a wyvern devouring a boar and started setting up their trap. Lifted his arms and concentrated, channeling his magic. Without warning, enormous ice spikes plummeted from above. Blades of light rained down from the sky, pinning the monstrous creature to the earth as the warrior swiftly approached its head. Observing their dwindling food supply, the boy mentioned the need to hunt more animals. Soon after, an icy arrow struck a rabbit and held it against the side of the mountain. The group continued by launching surprise attacks on other wyverns scattered throughout the region. Once they defeated another beast, reflected on how the hunt seemed to be getting easier, while Abel admitted he remained surprised by their recent success. As the hero sliced the fresh meat, he remarked that all that remained was to finish drying it before they could resume their journey. The boy then pointed out a possible route ahead, but as Abel completed his sentence, he and his companion turned to their left, noticing a massive creature that looked like a griffin intently watching him. Both of them soon realized that the creature's attention is locked firmly to the right. The rabbit encountered, who had a rope secured around his waist. He reaches out, grabs one, and hurls it toward the creature. The creature eagerly devoured the food, appearing ravenous in size. Despite its hunger, the griffin remained energetic and lively, prompting the hero to instruct Abel to offer it some food as well. The warrior reached to his belt, retrieved a rabbit, and threw it toward the beast. The creature quickly snatched up the offering before soaring away. The hero spotted a road stretching out behind the creature and drew Abel's attention to it. Abel, the warrior, observed a signpost nearby and assured that it was indeed a path. Hearing this, beckoned for Abel to join him as he started down the trail. The evil mountains stretched across the southern border of the central provinces, earning a reputation for being, even by seasoned adventurers. In ancient times, this range had a different name, but that has faded from memory. Now, people refer to them as the Evil Mountains due to the dangerous orcs and ogres that inhabit the area. After making it through these perilous peaks, Abel released a deep breath, relieved that he and his companions had survived the journey toward civilization. Observing Abel, wondered aloud if the warrior held a rank B adventurer status. Abel confirmed this, acknowledging his adventurer rank. The reason for the question became clear, as the hero confessed his uncertainty about the advantages of joining an adventurer's guild. Abel responded by mentioning that membership meant exemption from tolls and city taxes. Abel went on to clarify that the guild card functioned as identification, granting adventurers unrestricted entry into cities and enabling them to secure more favorable deals in the marketplace. Hearing this, felt reassured, realizing this was the information he had been hoping for. Abel continued by mentioning that the guild not only held onto adventurers' possessions, but also safeguarded their earnings. He concluded by pointing out that it would be far too risky for anyone to travel with all their money on hand. As listened, he marveled at how guilds essentially operated like banks. Surrounded by towering skyscrapers, he stood in the heart of the city, clutching a pouch in one hand as he studied a pamphlet intently. The hero recalled asking Abel various questions during their journey, including if it was possible to access funds from different guild branches whenever needed. Abel admitted that his understanding was mostly about the central provinces, though he mentioned that the guild functioned independently and had a presence in every country. He pointed out that during times of war, nations could employ the guild and its adventurers as mercenaries. As considered that hiring mercenaries might be more cost-effective than deploying regular troops, the warrior clarified that such offers could either be accepted or turned down by the adventurers themselves. Abel then confessed his worry that an enemy might seize all his possessions, leaving him with no option but to fight back. Clearly upset, questioned how people could allow their finances to be used as leverage and wondered why the governments would permit such a practice. Suddenly, noticed, delighted by the taste, he continues to request additional servings of curry, one right after another. He continued to eat, piling his plate with even more food as the night went on, never slowing down. As wandered through the bustling city alongside Abel, curiosity sparked in his eyes as he wondered aloud about the availability of curry in Loon. Abel responded with a confident smile, explaining that curry was actually a staple dish found frequently in the southern part of the kingdom. The hero made a quiet vow to himself, determined to attempt making the same curry once he was back in Rondo Forest. Following morning, as they strolled through the bustling city streets, wondered aloud to Abel if some people chose to live outside the city's borders. Abel answered that indeed, most farmers resided beyond the village limits, though in earlier times, everyone had made their homes within the city walls. He went on to clarify that this history was the reason Loon kept its gates open at night, prompting to express concerns about safety, especially since Loon appeared to employ significantly more patrols than. Abel assured them that, due to both its long-standing traditions and its size, Loon managed to maintain order effectively. When they reached Loon's entrance, a guard recognized Abel and greeted him personally, mentioning that his companion needed to. A man expressed astonishment at encountering Abel in person. Meanwhile, a towering fighter standing behind the girl appeared stunned by the fact that Abel was still alive. The narration revealed that B-rank adventurers were uncommon, and it clarified that Abel held the position of leader in the Crimson Sword group. Abel gathered a team made up of Rhea, who served as the priestess, Warren, who carried the shield, and who specialized in magic. As the hero observed this, they realized that befriending Abel might prove beneficial, since Abel was admired and respected by many people nearby. Abel put his hands on shoulders and introduced him to the group, calling the person who had saved his life and made his safe arrival possible. He announced that would soon register as an adventurer, and afterward would become one of them, asking everyone to welcome the new member warmly. The assembled adventurers responded with broad, friendly smiles directed at, offered a brief introduction of himself, expressing his pleasure at meeting everyone in the room. One man showed his gratitude for saving Abel, while another expressed interest in getting to know him better. Abel then turned to, asking if she could handle registration paperwork, mentioning his intention to recommend for DR. The boy opened his mouth to object once more, but the guild master quickly warned him not to insult Abel's reputation by turning down the offered share. Realizing he had no choice, the boy reluctantly agreed to the arrangement, 60% for himself and 40% for Abel. At the reception desk, tried to get someone's attention, but they appeared distracted as she politely requested that they hold on. Moments later, the scene shifted to the hallway, where the receptionist called out urgently for someone to stop, insisting that matters were still unresolved. Attention was suddenly drawn to an odd occurrence near the entrance of the hall. As a girl pushed open the door, she froze in disbelief. The sight of Abel alive overwhelmed her, and she collapsed to the floor, tears streaming down her face. With a gentle smile, the warrior turned to and expressed his regret for causing her distress. Immediately following that moment, a priestess accompanied by a towering warrior stepped into the room. Abel acknowledged their arrival, announcing his return. The priestess, her gaze brimming with feeling, offered him a heartfelt welcome. Rising from his seat, the remark that there was much to talk about and instructed, and to locate the necessary documents in his office. Inside his office, the master instructed the hero to take a seat while requesting Nana to bring the necessary documents for registering as a D-rank adventurer. Feeling somewhat nervous, hesitantly questioned whether he truly deserved a D-rank, but the master offered him comforting assurance that the rank was appropriate. He proceeded to question the protagonist, wondering who could remain unconvinced by the impressive quantity of magic stones they had retrieved. Meanwhile, felt a wave of embarrassment, acutely aware that it was Abel who had landed the decisive attacks, leaving him overshadowed. Acknowledged the warrior's impressive abilities, but pointed out that, regardless of skill, no lone fighter could defeat a wyvern without help. This implied that the hero possessed enough strength to give Abel the chance to land the final blow against the monsters. Concluded that the hero clearly met the requirements to become a D-rank adventurer. The then greeted with a gentle, playful punch, finding himself unexpectedly impressed. He remarked on surprising athleticism, especially for someone skilled in magic. Responded by sharing that he once hunted by himself and trained his body to prepare for times when his magic might fail during a battle or if he needed to escape quickly. The nodded in agreement, expressing that he fully grasped the young man's point and wished that more of today's youth shared such perspectives. Just then, a knock sounded at the office door, prompting to invite the visitor inside. Walked into the office holding an object that resembled a crystal ball, announcing that she had brought the tool needed for registration. Expressed his gratitude to her and told he would let her handle the paperwork. He advised the hero to simply do as instructed, assuring him that the process would be easy. Then used the moment to properly introduce herself too, mentioning that she was employed at the Adventurers Guild of Loon. The hero expresses his gratitude for the warm welcome and shares that he is pleased to make her acquaintance. As she sits facing him, explains that she must first clarify some important information and requests that he respond to several questions. She inquired about his name, occupation, and the nature of his work, and responded accurately to each question until she asked where he lived. At that moment, embarrassment crept in as he admitted he did not yet have a place to stay, having just arrived in the city. She assured him that the guild provided dormitory accommodations for up to 300 days after registration, giving newcomers ample time to find their footing. She also explained that the dorms were designed to help new adventurers connect, and that he was free to leave anytime within those 300 days if he desired. As examined the paper she handed him, he marveled at how mysterious still seemed, especially since there were no printers. Yet gestured toward the crystal ball she had brought with her, requesting that the young hero place his hand over it. Obediently, the boy set his hand atop the sphere, which immediately responded with a mysterious voice announcing that his registration was complete. With a cheerful expression, informed him that he could now lift his hand and thanked him for his cooperation. Soon after, she handed him a guild ID card and explained that replacing the card would require a payment of 1 gold coin if it were ever lost or damaged. As he expressed his gratitude, the boy glanced at the card, quietly pondering whether it could be used to accumulate points. Not long afterward, Abel's team of adventurers entered the office of the guild master. Abel glanced at the hero, explaining that he had no alternative except to attend because he was the guest of honor. With lingering confusion in his eyes, shifts his gaze toward the camera. The warrior informed the group that the Golden Wave served as their regular inn, promising to reserve a room for so he could indulge in drinks to his heart's content. Abel insisted that had no say in the matter and was obligated to accept their invitation. Soon after, a voice announced the completion of the registration process and inquired if the hero had any further questions. Eagerly, the warrior offered to address anything wanted to know and encouraged him to set out. The priestess mentioned she would head to the inn ahead of them to begin preparations, while Abel teased by claiming he was taking away from him. Turning to the hero expressed his gratitude for all their assistance. The warrior found themselves beyond the evil mountains after surviving a shipwreck and now believes that the group has treated treated them poorly. Afterward, he resolves that the warrior is relieved from any further investigation into the smuggling operation and determines that, going forward, he will not assign him to tasks related to water or the ocean. In his thoughts, he expresses gratitude to once more for ensuring Abel's safe return, uncertain of how he would have coped if things had ended differently. Moving toward a bookshelf, he considers that he ought to notify someone about the warrior's safety. He moved toward the shelf and grabbed an object resembling a telephone. As and Abel made their way along the busy avenues of Loon, Abel assured that he would fulfill his promise of a reward for saving him by purchasing new clothing and a staff. Abel mentioned that likely felt comfortable in his familiar leather outfit and sandals, but he intended to find something that matched usual style as closely as possible. However, reassured Abel that there was no need to be overly cautious, since he understood that strolling through the city in nothing but a leather loincloth wasn't exactly appropriate. He explains that he doesn't have any particular fondness for his current clothes, since he just wore whatever was available in the forest, and assures the warrior that he'll gladly accept any garments offered to him. Hearing this, the warrior visibly relaxes and lets know he is welcome to choose some everyday outfits as well as a couple of finer sets. As they continued down the path, the hero turned to Abel with a curious look, questioning the necessity of carrying a staff. While sorting through various outfits, doubts lingered in his mind about whether mages truly required such an item. From within the fitting room's voice carried out, clarifying that a staff wasn't essential for him. He assured them of his ability to perform magic without relying on one. Abel remarked that he had heard staffs could boost a person's magical strength, and he found himself curious about how powerful might become if he tried using one. While continued putting on his clothes, he responded that he had never wielded a staff before, and if the situation called for it, he trusted his sword skills for fighting up close. Caught off guard, the warrior questioned whether he truly possessed any skill with a sword, or if he was simply referring to the knife he always carried, rather than an actual blade. At the same time, found himself thinking that he might have already discussed this topic with Abel before. As memories of their earlier talk surface, the boy recalls admitting that, as a wind mage, he tended to rush straight at his opponents, an admission he would never make if he fought without a sword. While they step out of the store, the warrior repeats his offer about the staff, questioning if the boy truly wants to leave it behind. The boy insists there's no need for it, points out that he wouldn't have any idea how to handle a staff anyway, and reminds them all that he already carries a sword. Abel consented, yet he remarked that in truth he lacked a proper sword. Puzzled by this, raised his own weapon and insisted that it served as his sword. The seasoned warrior questioned whether truly considered that blade a sword, confessing that he had always assumed it was merely a dagger. However, dismissed this as unimportant, explaining that the real concern was his ignorance of even the most basic aspects of the world. Curious, the warrior inquired about this ignorance, prompting to confess that he was unfamiliar with simple facts such as units of measurement or the length of a day. Abel admitted he had always found odd, but he had not realized just how little knew. The warrior patiently outlines the fundamental aspects of the world, reassuring the young hero that memorizing every detail immediately isn't necessary. Despite this, the boy retains all the information with ease. Abel, impressed by his companion's sharp memory, silently questions whether the child is exceptionally gifted. Deciding to set aside that thought for now, Abel notes their arrival at the renowned Golden Wave Tavern and hints that should prepare himself for a night of drinking. When dawn breaks, Loon awakens, reflecting on the events of the night before. He feels a throbbing pain in his head and believes it must be from drinking too much. Convinced that he is hungover, he guesses that must have helped him get to the room the previous night. The combination of his hangover and other factors accounted for the condition he had been in the previous night. Inside the tavern, the crowd lifted their mugs high, their faces alight with joy as they celebrated Abel's victorious homecoming. Abel and his companion sipped their drinks, sharing laughter as they agreed that the beverage tasted wonderful and hit the spot just right. As he made his way down the staircase, memories of a poem from his past surfaced in his mind. Stories circulated about tall grass enduring because of the hopes and memories of legendary fighters. Later, he found himself seated in the bustling tavern, his head bowed low as the remnants of his hangover lingered. A woman passed by, offering a cheerful morning greeting to the protagonist and informing him that breakfast would be ready shortly, inviting him to choose any seat he preferred. In response, expressed his gratitude and approached her, hoping to pose another question. He inquired about the previous night's charges, mentioning that he would be staying at the guild's accommodations. The woman reassured him, explaining that Abel had already settled the bill on his behalf. Found himself unexpectedly moved by the warrior's generosity, realizing that anyone willing to pay for others showed rare kindness. Soon afterward, he made his way to the Adventurers Guild headquarters, eager to discuss the offer had mentioned the previous day. Upon arrival, welcomed him with a bright greeting and inquired about what she could do for him. Expressed his interest in learning more about the guild's accommodations. Informed him that around 30 people currently resided at the guild, although some were often away exploring dungeons, so the number of people present varied day to day. She explained that each room accommodated 6 individuals and that all members could use the shared common area, since there were no other visitors waiting. He realized he could do that and seized the moment to inquire about the rules for staying there, prompting 9 to explain them. Was allowed to come and go freely, with access to the rooms, shared bathrooms, and a hallway that included a kitchen. Explained that none of the residents served as caretakers and that everyone was expected to look after themselves. Clearly impressed, wondered aloud if there had ever been caretakers in the past. Confirmed that there had been, but suggested that the details would take quite some time to explain. These days, the only task handled by someone outside was cleaning. She mentioned that a former adventurer now owned a cleaning business in the city, prompting to remark that this seemed like a common path for retired adventurers. Then let know he would be sharing room 10. As Mana left, Mills pulled on a shirt, and Ida observed him intently, her expression stern. Now fully dressed, Nils remarked on how stunning Miss looked, urged him to settle down, pointing out that everyone admired the receptionists, but insisted Nils had no chance. Feeling offended, Nils insisted that every man dreamed of marrying a receptionist after achieving fame, while reminded him that those women were reserved for nobles rather than regular adventurers. Changing the subject, encouraged Nils to let go of those thoughts and told their new roommate there was no need for formalities since they would be living together. The girl admitted she had been nervous about who she would end up sharing a room with, but was relieved that it turned out to be him. Nils agreed, saying he would have disliked having someone like Dan from room 1. He continued, explaining that recent registration in Lune did not guarantee his loyalty to the Kingdom of Knightly, as others might try to persuade him to join their kingdoms. Agreed, pointing out that if even a portion of Abel's claims about were accurate, then was truly remarkable. Felt disheartened, realizing his own friend had little faith in him. Still, there remained the possibility that might leave Lune behind and settle in a different city. Rhea acknowledged this concern, noting that Lune would lose an important asset if that happened, which would also weaken the Kingdom of Knightly. She added that it would be disastrous if joined the Empire instead. Abel quickly reassured. He explained that he had acquired Wyvern magic stones and had already requested the guild master to handle their sale. He promised that once he received the payment, he would share the profits with his friends. His friends could hardly believe what they were hearing and immediately wanted to know how he managed to obtain Wyvern magic stones. Wondered aloud if Abel might have assisted another group or done something similar. Abel it, reminding her that he had already explained the situation. He recounted that a wyvern nest was located south of the Evil Mountains, and they had to defeat those creatures on their journey to Lune, since leaving them behind would have been a serious error. Still in disbelief and attempting to process the information, tried to clarify, asking if Abel and really had taken down the wyverns themselves. Abel confirmed they had. He described how, while launched ice spears at the wyverns' wings, he waited for them to crash down before targeting their eyes, as struggled to comprehend the idea of using ice. Rumors spread that he unleashed a single assault that scorched 1,000 soldiers from the kingdom. Stories also claimed he brought down a wyvern in just one strike and crushed a group of rebels who had locked themselves inside a city. Abel stood in the city, a smile on his face, as he expressed his certainty that facing the Inferno mage in combat was something he hoped to avoid. With a more serious tone, he admits that facing in battle is something he would rather avoid. The warrior reflected on his ability to use magic without reciting any spells, recalling how would announce impressive-sounding names for his attacks. Even Abel could tell those names were invented on the spot, but this habit suited his character perfectly. In addition to being able to use spells without making a sound, he was also capable of casting them at an impressive speed. He wondered if he could even shatter's formidable ice wall, even when using his strongest impalement attack. What made him even more uncertain was the fact that could continue launching ice spears from behind the barrier, each one aimed with lethal intent. He struggled to find any possible way he could come out on top, and that was even before considering the words he spoke once they reached the city of Lune. He recalls the moment when confidently held his sword aloft, demonstrating a stance that showed he was ready to battle anyone at close range. Abel, weary of daydreams, insists there's nothing amusing about the situation. Even with the aid of magic, he admits he can't picture himself overcoming. Abel acknowledges that talent in hand-to-hand combat makes him extraordinary, almost unnatural. Furthermore, Abel can't forget that the Empire harbors its own irregularity, the infamous Hell Mage. Abel realized that provoking a mage would only lead to trouble. During the 5th session of the beginner dungeon seminar, a participant lifted their hand and encouraged to proceed. Grateful, expressed his thanks, and inquired whether any teleportation device existed that could transport him directly to the last 4 locations he had already completed. All eyes turned to who stood frozen in place, his mouth hanging open in shock. The instructor acknowledged knowledge, confirming that he was correct and explaining that certain dungeons were indeed equipped with such mechanisms. He continued by mentioning that the Loon dungeon lacked this particular feature, unlike other dungeons where adventurers could pick up their exploration right from the point they had stopped. The instructor admitted this was all the information he had, confessing that he was unfamiliar with the specific technical aspects or the real. She thanked him and assured him that it was no trouble at all. As the seminar concluded, strode in front of, his expression clouded with annoyance. On the other hand, quietly congratulated himself for correctly deducing that the Lu dungeon was missing that particular aspect, reassuring himself that everything was fine. Expressing his admiration, left the air between them tinged with discomfort. In response, explained that his question had only come from simple curiosity and insisted it wasn't anything important. Without warning, the gates swung open with a thunderous clang. The entire group stepped into a heavily secured chamber, its entrance and walls reinforced with sturdy iron bars. The instructor had previously clarified that monster outbreaks from the dungeon occurred periodically, disrupting the peace every few years. He continued by mentioning the installation of sturdy bars, which were constructed specifically to prevent these creatures from making their way into the city. He gestures toward the double gates, detailing how the system keeps track of everyone who enters by logging their names, dates, and times. If anyone fails to come back, the records mark them as missing. The instructor announces that he has documented everyone's names and the times they arrived, signifying that the group is now officially entering. At that moment, becomes aware of something unusual nearby. Glancing to his side, he spots shaking with nerves. Encourages to calm down, noticing how anxious he appears. Moving closer, advises to take a few deep breaths to help settle his nerves. Once follows the advice, he admits to feeling a little more at ease. Despite this, observes that still looks rather pale, so he offers further reassurance, reminding that they are facing this experience together and that everything will turn out all right. The group moved beyond the gates and began their descent down a shadowy staircase that brought them to the first level of the dungeon. Swallows hard, gathering his courage before beginning his cautious descent down the dimly lit staircase that leads into the dungeon's darkness. As soon as they arrive at the shadowy entrance, the group gazed around at the vast expanse of the floor, taking in its impressive size. The instructor clarified that only low-level monsters inhabited this area, giving everyone permission to explore. However, he warned them that anyone who failed to return within 2 hours would be classified as missing. He further stated that anyone marked as missing would be temporarily barred from re-entering the dungeon, with weapons drawn and alert, and advanced together, moving in sync. Without warning, the hero became aware of another presence lurking nearby, causing to react with fear and urgently question the source of the danger. Ria calmly informed them that their target would arrive in 1 minute, promising to freeze it with ice magic, giving the perfect chance to attack with his sword. He assures the group that they will remain safe if they manage to intercept the enemy before it can strike. As they venture deeper into the shadowy cave, an unfamiliar creature's noise reaches their ears. A soldier ant stood before them and recognized it from the illustrations in the book that the false had handed to him. The creature moved forward, finally coming to a halt directly before the group of heroes. The hero explained that since the creature did not spit acid, the best way to defeat it would be to come at it from the side and cut off its head. Nodded in understanding and moved aside to make room. He glanced at, promising to give his all. Meanwhile, began focusing his energy, ready to unleash his ice magic and let know the attack was about to begin. He extended his hand, murmuring an incantation as shimmering water bubbles gathered in the air above the soldier ant. Concentrating, the boy summoned icy energy, directing sharp shards toward his foe. A barrage of icy spears cascaded from above, piercing the soldier and anchoring his body firmly to the earth. At that instant, urgently directed Ammon to circle around and decapitate the beast. Ammon acknowledged the command and swiftly dashed toward the creature's flank. Relying on his agility, the swordsman lunged forward, swinging his blade. With a swift motion, the hero sliced the creature's head clean off its body. Triumphant, he raised his arms high in victory. Meanwhile, stood frozen, his eyes wide with disbelief as he looked back and forth between the fallen soldier and the hero who had just bested him. Called out to, announcing his accomplishment, praised for his success and told him he had done an excellent job. As walked over to the fallen ant, he mentioned that they would take its magic stone as a way to remember his first battle in a dungeon. Still surprised, questioned whether was certain about this decision. Assured him that he was, explaining that as adventurers, this was the standard way they earned their rewards inside dungeons. The swordsman acknowledged his words and remarked that he would remember this for the future, then suggested it might be a good idea to return to the meeting place. The protagonist explained that the slugs would soon arrive. Inside the dungeon, he believes that gaining confidence comes most easily through achieving success. Mugs clinked together overhead as the group reveled in their victory over a soldier ant during their very first venture into the dungeon. With his mouth full, admitted that he had only managed the final strike because had immobilized the creature, giving him the chance to attack. Their skilled leader complimented the boy's swordsmanship, insisting that shouldn't downplay his own abilities. Nils added that it made no difference who landed the final blow, What truly mattered was that they could all celebrate together. After their meal and drinks, and Nils shared their plan to continue exploring the dungeon for the next 2 days, then asked and about their intentions. Abel materialized behind the boys, explaining that the ants were appearing because their tunnels connected different floors, making it easier for them to travel up and down. Felt it was unfair for an experienced adventurer to tease beginners, and expressed his disapproval. The seasoned warrior clarified that he was simply giving a truthful answer to the newcomer's inquiry. Abel then turned to the group, asking if they were the hero's roommates as he formally introduced himself. He mentioned that while was strong, he also had some personality quirks. The hero, sensing provocation in Abel's words, accepted the challenge without hesitation. Meanwhile, Nils tried to recall where he had heard the name Abel before. Suddenly it came to him, Abel. Warren extended his hand, but Abel insisted he was perfectly capable of walking by himself. Offered another apology, mentioning that they still had business to finish at the guild, and responded that it was all right. Meanwhile, Warren seized Abel and began dragging him away. As Warren carried him off, Abel yelled back accusing him of betrayal, and shouted at Warren to stop ignoring him and let him go. The entire table watched the chaotic scene in stunned silence, while the protagonist looked on with an amused grin. Commented that the display had been quite impressive. With eyes shining, Nils exclaimed his admiration for Abel, declaring how amazing he thought Abel was. Inside Loon's dungeon, the first floor is protected by 2 sets of sturdy security bars, clearly visible from the viewing area. They moved down to the second floor, noticing torches mounted on the walls. Commanded his ice to strike through his adversaries. Ice spears suddenly shot up from the ground underneath the creature's front paws, trapping them in place. His sword aiming a powerful strike at the helpless, motionless beasts before him. The swordsman moved his torch nearer to the fallen creatures, illuminating their forms as trailed behind him. The hero acknowledged the swordsman's impressive performance, prompting the swordsman to express gratitude for the praise. Afterward, revealed a new plan, suggesting that he should face the next opponent alone. He explained that fighting someone who hadn't been hurt would make the contest more exciting. To make things fair, promised to only target the wolf's front legs, and accepted this condition. The swordsman questioned the hero's certainty, prompting to wonder about the reason behind the inquiry. Expressed his appreciation for both the lessons and the hero's companionship, but he wondered aloud if that was truly sufficient for. In response, reassured him, telling there was no need for concern. The man observed that the boy's way of fighting reminded him of Abel, and wondered aloud if the boy had been taught by someone back in his village. Hearing this comparison to the skilled warrior, felt startled, but admitted that he had indeed learned from a retired adventurer who once lived in his. He used to refer to the man as Grandpa, recalling how Grandpa had attended a renowned martial arts academy and put great effort into his work on the farm. He offers an apology, admitting that his memory goes no further. Remarks that true strength comes from having the basics ingrained deeply within oneself, just like Abel. The group resumes their journey, making their way along the dungeon's second floor. As they continue, the swordsman poses a question. The speaker wondered aloud at the hero's impressive knowledge of martial arts, especially since the hero was known primarily as a mage. Recalling the lessons he received from he reflects on how he once had an instructor who guided him. Despite developing a unique approach of his own, he realizes that his knowledge of the topic is still quite limited. Expressed his astonishment at the ability to master both swordsmanship and magic. He suddenly realizes that isn't always seen with a sword at his side. Unsheathed his sword and presented it to the swordsman. The swordsman's eyes widened in astonishment as the blade emitted a faint pinkish glow in the dim light of the dungeon. Curiosity piqued, the swordsman inquired about the remarkable weapon, explained that his master had entrusted it to him, and revealed that the sword was crafted specifically for those who practiced water magic. Observing the weapon, Oman recognized the blade's icy composition, and remarked that only a water mage could handle such an ice-forged sword. He mentions that this is the first time he has witnessed something of this nature, while observes 2 smaller wolves drawing near. The swordsman himself once more, anticipating the upcoming fight. Meanwhile, a group of smaller wolves caught sight of the boys and rushed at them aggressively. Explains his plan to wound one of the wolf's back legs, making it vulnerable so the swordsman can attack next. He summoned a stream of water and launched a pair of slender ice spears at the wolves. A blast of water slammed into one wolf, knocking it back, while sharp ice spears struck the other wolf's hind legs, causing it to stumble. The wolves quickly sprang back, trying to regain their footing after the assault. One wolf, wounded and struggling to catch its breath, fixed its gaze on Ammon as blood trickled from its legs. The swordsman locked eyes with the smaller wolf, then moved toward the target, lowering himself into a battle-ready posture. Observed closely while the wolf and the swordsman stood across from one another, ready to confront each other. He observes how fighting techniques allow no chances for his opponents to attack, yet worries begin to surface in his mind about whether the boy can keep up his energy. He believes that with consistent training, anyone has the potential to build up their stamina, and he feels confident that the swordsman can strengthen his endurance parents as well. He suddenly realizes that he hasn't been keeping up with his running exercises during his recent magic training. Not a single practice session has happened since he departed from his home in Rondo Forest. Still breathing hard, explained that he had succeeded in his task. The smaller wolf was overcome, and smiling warmly offered his congratulations. The hero quickly formed a protective wall of ice that stretched from the ground all the way to the ceiling, enclosing them both on all sides to ensure their safety. Since breaking through the ice barrier proved difficult for the beasts, he decided to summon them there so they could take a short rest. Collapsed onto the ground, his chest rising and falling rapidly as he tried to catch his breath, exhaustion written across his face. Reassured him that there was no need to hurry or overexert himself, and urged the weary swordsman to take a drink of water. After resting, remarked with wonder that he had never encountered an ice barrier so thin before. It was almost completely see-through. The young hero went on to clarify that ice typically appears cloudy due to impurities found in water and air. He added that, theoretically, if all impurities could be removed from the water, it would be possible to create perfectly clear ice, even without the use of magic. In this particular instance, however, the transparent ice had. Magic possessed a unique allure. Admired the wonders of water magic, expressing his amazement, while quietly believed he was helping to elevate the reputation of water mages through his own efforts. The swordsman admitted his surprise at how tiring it was to battle foes that didn't stand still. Curious, the hero questioned whether the swordsman had ever faced wild creatures before. At that, explained that his only battles with monsters had always involved several people working together to defeat one beast. Realization dawned on, who now saw how much more challenging it was to fight a monster alone compared to working with a group. He finds that handling things alone is much more overwhelming. He also mentions that the swordsman's way of fighting quickly drains his energy. He explains that by refining his fighting technique, he could avoid many injuries, and believes that focusing on building his endurance will help him improve. He explains that running greatly boosts stamina, while practicing strikes helps develop strength in the arms and shoulders. Shares that his master showed him daily exercises and stances to train his body. He understood that consistently following those habits with dedication each day would lead to significant personal growth. He went on to explain that he had spent many years journeying alongside Abel. Despite Abel's reputation as a prodigy, he would rise at dawn each morning to practice without fail. The young swordsman felt astonished, realizing that even someone as talented as Abel had dedicated himself to rigorous daily training. Glanced downward, admitting to himself that perhaps he lacked the natural ability required to become a skilled swordsman. Promises to share the wisdom once spoken by the greatest champion he knows. When that champion was questioned about the true meaning of talent, he explained that true talent lies in the determination to push onward, that real strength comes from persistence, and then he turned to the swordsman to see whether he wished to continue or surrender. The determined swordsman, filled with renewed energy, declared his intention to persevere no matter what. When the following day arrived and sunlight poured through the windows, was found kneeling next to one of the beds in room 10. Around him, the presence of all the other beds could be seen. The surroundings remained deserted. Soon after appears, breathing hard and drenched in sweat. From afar, and Nils quietly observe as the swordsman pushes himself to keep running outdoors. The boy then turns to the girl, wondering aloud if they will need to run as well, and she confirms his suspicion with a nod. Meanwhile, just finishing getting dressed and reaching the doorway, catches sight of the two as they make their way outside. Witnessing the unfolding activity, he brightens and begins to hum cheerfully. In the next moment, someone drops a bag onto a table with a thud, commenting that its contents should suffice. Mentions her impressive book collection and inquires which titles might interest the potential. Responded by expressing his interest in finding books about alchemy. The city of Lune featured a pair of libraries. One stood in the north, while the other was located in the south. The southern library was nearer to the Adventurers Guild and offered a wider selection of books suitable for beginners. At a local bookstore, the hero discovered 3 books that caught his attention, but the shop only offered them for sale rather than lending them out. Of the 3, his top choice was a book filled with alchemy recipes. However, it was priced at 10 gold coins, and he currently only possessed 5. At that moment, he recalls obtaining magic stones from the wyverns he had vanquished, prompting him to head back to the guild for the time being. Moved along the busy streets with a cheerful tune on his lips, feeling pleased that the magic stones had fetched a generous amount. He realized he could take a break from working for some time, and the idea of having enough money without a job gave him a happiness he had never known before. Just then, something unusual caught his attention, and he lifted his gaze toward the sky. People along the street paused their activities, their attention captured by the remarkable sight of a solar eclipse starting to take shape overhead. The protagonist realized he had never imagined that such an occurrence could exist in this world. With the sun still hidden behind the eclipse, a person standing close to the protagonist looks around in confusion, clearly puzzled by the strange event. At that moment, is struck by a sudden sensation, as if an important change has just occurred. Something completely unexpected caught his attention. He suddenly halted and froze in place, right in the center of the street. The protagonist questions whether he has been cast into a mysterious void or a place that resembles the fantastical world surrounding him. He senses the world fading away, leaving him alone, and questions whether anyone else exists in the vast emptiness surrounding him. Realized that any sudden movement could draw unwanted attention from those close by, leaving him with only one possible action. He slowly let out his breath, observing how it drifted in the chilly air surrounding him. He then called upon his magic, drawing moisture from the air to send out a sonar-like wave. As the wave traveled and finally bounced off an object, he sensed the presence of someone roughly the size of a human, though with some subtle differences. Unlike others, the protagonist chose to launch an assault, summoning his formidable ice barrier composed of 10 layers. In an instant, 10 towering walls of ice formed one after another, creating a protective shield before. Without warning, a mysterious voice echoed in the hero's thoughts, questioning whether he had managed to capture a human. The hero quickly realized that the speaker must be powerful, since they had managed to penetrate his ice barrier, even though they remained 200 meters distant. Despite the distance, the voice seemed to resonate right beside him, leaving him puzzled. The disembodied voice spoke once more. The observer expressed admiration for, noting that he stood out as an exceptional example. Meanwhile, the boy stayed. He continued to rely on his sonar, anticipating what might unfold next. The source of the strange voice is finally revealed to them. Standing before them is a demon-like woman, easily recognized by her curved horns. The woman remarks on the impressive quality of the ice she faced, offering words of admiration. Mystical powers began to take shape, allowing the hero to see the mysterious figure clearly. Curiosity filled the hero's mind as he questioned whether she might be in. Without warning, an enormous surge of flames rushed toward him. A thunderous roar grew louder, filling the air. The boy questioned whether he could withstand such overwhelming power, as the woman grinned and unleashed her magical assault against him. In response, summoned a protective wall of ice before him, hoping it would shield him from the oncoming attack. After waiting for several moments, he begins to question whether the assault has finally ended. The barrier before him suddenly broke apart, leaving him stunned by the reality unfolding before his eyes. When the barrier shattered, a sharp gust shaped like a spear shot straight toward his chest, striking him right in the heart. The force of the blow hurled the hero backward, launching them several meters away from the point of impact. The hero regained his balance, realizing just how narrowly he had escaped danger. Seizing the opportunity, the woman moved closer, remarking to herself that her air spear had failed to penetrate the boy's defenses. She looked at, noting that his cloak appeared to be the Fairy King's, which could explain why her attack had not worked. Despite this, she acknowledged to herself that he had managed to defend himself impressively. She declared that if it came to that, she would be the one to defeat him. Understanding what planned, the hero reached for his sword and started to draw it. With astonishing speed, the woman suddenly materializes before the hero, her sword poised to deliver a deadly blow. Narrowly evaded the initial strike, barely having a moment to respond before his opponent pressed forward with another swift attack. The clash of their swords filled the air with a fierce energy as both fought with relentless vigor. Throughout the heated duel, the woman maintained a confident smile, skillfully launching attacks and skillfully deflecting blows. Amidst the rapid exchange, both combatants simultaneously decided to use magic, reaching out at the same instant to channel their power. Their combined efforts triggered a sudden explosion, sending them both flying backward and forcing a brief pause in the battle. Seizing the moment, the woman remarked on his remarkable ability to cast spells at an astonishing speed, even calling him a monster. She suddenly understood that he could comprehend her words, making her aware of how much more threatening he had become. In the next moment, a huge explosion erupted while they declared that eliminating the hero was now necessary. While their swords clashed back and forth, questioned whether she had been aiming to end his life all along. During the heated clash of blades, the hero summoned an icy spear and launched it toward the woman blocked the attack with ease, showing no sign of struggle. Seizing the opportunity, the hero created a ring of ice spears that hovered menacingly around her. Despite this effort, the attack had no impact, and the two adversaries locked eyes as the lingering mist from the water magic slowly faded away. The man challenges the young hero, questioning whether he has shown all his strength. In response, the boy confidently assures him that he is only getting started. Mario summoned a flurry of ice spears and launched them relentlessly toward the. He then redirected Corvus's water jets toward the woman, prompting her to summon a protective barrier just in time to block the assault as water cascaded down from above. Summoning every ounce of his strength and mastery over water magic, rain began to cascade heavily over the, drenching the whole city beneath its relentless downpour. Standing amidst the storm he summoned, the woman gazed at the hero with a look of triumph, confident that she had successfully blocked every one of his assaults. However, as she lingered in the rainfall, Her eyes caught something unusual within it, right at the moment when the hero quietly spoke a single word. Rain poured down relentlessly, sizzling against the skin and causing her flesh to burn, forcing agonized howls from her lips. Overwhelmed by excruciating pain, she let out a desperate scream while forcing herself to concentrate on launching a counterattack. A powerful blast suddenly engulfs the area surrounding causing the hero to quickly fall back in order to avoid getting trapped in the chaos. Fixed his gaze on his focus unwavering even as exhaustion began to take its toll, causing his breath to grow heavy and labored. The woman regretfully announces that her time has run out, reflecting that it has been a long while since she last had so much fun in a battle. Observing that her wounds have already healed, instructs her to go. She gazes at him, noting that he seemed to take as much pleasure in the experience as she did. She explains that the strange space formed during the eclipse is beyond her influence. Meanwhile, the hero observes her with wary eyes, uncertain of what to expect. She proceeded to state her full name, Albuquerque, and inquired about the protagonist's identity. In response, he referred to her as. She was taken aback, realizing she should have destroyed him, even at the expense of her own life, since he had discovered her real identity. Explained that her time was running out and defeating him would not be simple. With those words, she took her leave, assuring him that their paths would cross once more. The hero, however, showed no interest in facing the again, and made his feelings about another encounter unmistakable. The woman urges him to stop making those remarks, warning that with his abilities, he is bound to encounter her again, or someone similar, and she advises him to stay alive when facing the others. She declared her intention to end his life, and warned that when their paths crossed again, she would have gained much more strength. With those parting words, she bids farewell to, who, as though emerging from a dream, suddenly finds himself back in the familiar city location where he had stood before vanishing into the void. Surrounded by emptiness, he questioned whether he had truly returned. Searching the area, he found a bench and took a seat, trying to make sense of the recent events. He lets out a relieved breath, realizing with astonishment that he has made it through. He recalls the previous moment when his life was nearly taken during a battle, confronting the deadly water that attacked him by using magic nullifying powers. She easily evaded attacks, shattering his ice spears with effortless precision. A sharp ache flared in his chest, drawing his focus. The memory of air spear striking that very spot rushed back to him, making him realize he was likely injured. He expressed gratitude to his master for the cloak, recognizing that without it, his shoulder would likely be badly injured, despite the cloak appearing completely unharmed. He gently places his lips on the injured area, but a wave of regret washes over him the moment he does. He recalled his fight against, and questioned whether the force she wielded against him had been magic, since her attacks were unbelievably strong, and her movements almost impossibly fast. She moved with such speed, darting in and out in less than a heartbeat, that it seemed almost as if she was harnessing the wind itself to enhance her agility. He remembers that she once said her time was limited, and now he believes it was likely due to the approaching solar eclipse. At the same time, it occurs to them that the strange space might have appeared solely during the eclipse, leaving the city untouched by their battle and causing harm only to themselves. He realized that much about the recent events remained a mystery to him, but he knew he couldn't afford to linger on those thoughts at the moment. He decided to purchase the alchemy book before heading back to his room, where he planned to investigate, despite the fact that the imposter had no knowledge about them. He recalled a conversation with Abel, during which Abel admitted he was familiar with demons, but claimed to have no knowledge of. He assumes Abel is likely the third son of a noble family, and realizes that if Abel himself is unsure, uncovering any details about them in this world will prove to be a difficult task. The protagonist rises from his seat and makes up his mind to purchase the book before heading back to his dormitory. After some time had passed, the boy made his way back to the dormitory. When he entered the room, he found it empty and wondered if his friends were still busy with training. Nils, breathing hard from exhaustion, thought to himself that if he had more energy, he could easily defeat everyone. Suddenly, a group of 5 approached and taunted him, comparing his struggle to the pitiful whine of a beaten dog. Unimpressed, reflected on how ironic it was to hear such words from those who had launched a surprise attack. One member of the group scoffed at her, questioning whether she really expected monsters to announce themselves before attacking, or to pause just because their enemies were tired. He insisted that they must. Warrior unleashed a stream of curses directed at the man, while calmly remarked that people were responsible for their own misfortune if they allowed themselves to become careless. Jagged spears of ice erupted from the ground, aiming for the men's backs. One of the men near Nils suddenly realized the danger his friends were in, entered the scene, and with a cool demeanor pointed out that the man probably wanted to know what had happened, then explained that he had sent those ice spears to strike his friends from behind. As the man began to hurl insults at the young hero, cut him off, reminding him that letting one's guard down was a fatal mistake. Questioned whether he was supposed to give a warning before attacking, as he had once told Nils to do when fighting monsters, then remarked that this was the consequence of their laziness, while the group shared a moment of laughter, unwinding together and savoring the comfort of a much-needed bath. The kingdom of Nightly stood as a prominent city in the central province, while to its southern border, the city of Loon claimed the title of the largest in that region. The Adventurers Guild canteen buzzed with activity. Nils mentioned to and Edo that they were planning to team up for a dungeon expedition the following day, and he invited to come along. However, politely declined, explaining that he had other plans he wanted to pursue in the city. Nils accepted its response without hesitation, having already assumed that might choose to go his own way. Quickly launched his journey as a D-rank adventurer, and his swift victory over Dan from Rune 4 only reinforced his roommate's beliefs. The difference in strength between and the others was enormous, and having a powerful adventurer like him on dungeon expeditions made those missions far less challenging. However, this often results in significant stress for both the more capable and less experienced team members. For this reason, the guild advises adventurers to join parties with others who have similar abilities. Despite being an outsider, the hero faced the common expectation that new adventurers typically lacked significant strength when they first began their journeys. He was an unusual case, someone even the guild never expected to show up at the dormitories. When Monday arrived, his friends wished him farewell before leaving for the dungeon. Meanwhile, decided he would spend the day improving his magical control and endurance by jogging along the city's outer walls. Just one day earlier, his magic had proven stronger than yet had demonstrated a quicker pace when casting his own spells. He was determined to increase both the speed and accuracy of his magic. He knew he had to work hard to build his skills and turn his flaws into strengths. Still, he couldn't help but notice that she was unbelievably quicker than he was. She recalls witnessing cover dozens of meters in the blink of an eye, likely with the help of wind magic. Meanwhile, ponders whether he could replicate that feat by relying on his own water magic abilities. He imagines being able to blast water from his feet, yet realizes he would also have to find a safe method to push himself off his back without risking serious injury. He wondered if he could also emit a burst from the back of his neck, thinking that might be effective. As he pondered his next move, he realized he needed to send a stream of water all the way down his back, while also considering the possibility of freezing the ground ahead as he advanced. He proceeded to create a layer of ice beneath him, and calculated that, at this moment, he could likely manage up to 256 water jets at once. Determined to see if he was right, he concentrated and attempted to unleash the water jets from his back. However, the result was disappointing, as things did not go as planned. He sank to his knees, admitting defeat. Whether it was to himself or another remained unclear. Doubt crept in as he wondered if he simply wasn't capable yet, but he held on to hope that if he... At the same time, deep within the dungeon, Nils explained to that having an additional swordsman by their side made hunting much quicker, particularly when facing goblins. Explained that goblins were simpler to overcome than the smaller wolves, pointing out that their slower movements made them less of a challenge. Nils responded. They decided to pause for a moment, suggesting that everyone try licking some salt and drink water. During the break, mentioned something. Nils vaguely recalled a mention of salt from the previous day, though the details escaped him. As focused on casting her healing magic, Nils shared that back in his village, people often drank water and licked salt after they had been sweating, a customary practice rooted in local tradition. Peter expressed concern about the appearance of swoons, while Nils took a seat to recover, remarking that they had narrowly escaped danger this time. He pointed out that goblin archers were not supposed to be found on the 5th floor, and realizing they were present made him uneasy about moving ahead, shared his concerns and agreed with his decision. The group was set to arrive back sooner than anyone had anticipated, and despite having to divide the treasure among 3 people, they still came away with a larger haul than they usually did. Upon reaching the Adventurers Guild Hall, Nils offered a timid greeting. Noticing his early arrival, inquired if they had finished their tasks ahead of schedule. Nils, caught off guard, stumbled over his words as he confirmed they had and began to praise her. Before Nils could finish, stepped forward and explained to Mana that their early return was due to encountering a goblin archer on the dungeon's 5th floor, displaying the magic stone they had acquired as evidence. Mana inspected the stone in his hand and affirmed that it indeed belonged to a goblin archer. Realizing the significance of this find, announced she would notify thee and update the record for that section. Rhea questioned how someone could speak that way when their friendship had lasted since they were kids. Lynn responded by pointing out that Abel was always grumbling and suggested he should try being as reserved as Warren every now and then. After that, they continued speaking. The members of the Crimson Sword stood before this door and rapped firmly on its surface. From within the room, a voice promptly invited them to enter. As Abel stepped into the room, and leaders of the White Brigade welcomed him with courteous greetings. Abel offered a polite greeting as the others entered the room, his manner prompting to comment on how formal Abel's welcomes always seemed. The guild leader addressed the group, suggesting they likely already understood why they had been summoned, and expressed gratitude for their presence. He explained that the reason for the meeting was the recent appearance of goblin archers on the 5th floor. The warrior questioned the guild leader about his confidence in this information, and the guild leader assured everyone of his complete certainty. Producing a magic stone as evidence, he revealed that 3 F-rank adventurers had encountered goblins on the 5th floor, and one of those goblins had been an archer. Abel remarked that the prospects for the future looked bright, if even. He then instructs the Crimson Sword and the White Brigade to enter the dungeon and investigate if another major surge is imminent. The Great Surge refers to a phenomenon during which the number of monsters rises dramatically, causing creatures typically found on lower floors to suddenly emerge in higher areas. He offers an upfront payment of 100 gold coins, promising an additional 200 coins upon their successful return. Abel, seeking reassurance, prepares to voice a question. He wants to confirm whether their sole responsibility is to determine if another great surge is approaching. He affirms this, instructing them to report back immediately if such a surge is detected. He outlines the strategy. They will use a double barrier to prevent monsters from invading the city, support the defense with knights, and ready a counterattack. He further instructs the group to enter the dungeon the following morning, assuring them that no new adventurers will be allowed in until then. He explains that employees from the nearby guild branch stationed at the dungeon entrance will prevent others from entering, and then he inquires whether they are willing to take on the assignment. Abel explains that, for the Crimson Sword, acceptance and belonging mean the same thing as they do for the White Brigade. Later on Tuesday morning, just past 9 o'clock, early in the morning, Ammon approached Nils to inquire whether their report had led to any new information. Nils explained that the guild had posted a notice as a result of what they had submitted. Ammon, realizing was absent, recalled that had mentioned heading to the library. Soon after, the guild issued a citywide announcement declaring that all dungeon expeditions would be suspended beginning Tuesday, with no set date for resumption. Clouds blanketed the sky over Loon as Tuesday morning arrived, just past 9 o'clock, made his way to the southern library, determined to uncover books about and better understand the world he now called home. At the same time, Ammon and Nils confirmed that he had only brought half of the White Brigade, explaining that he left all D-rank and lower adventurers behind in the city and brought only those ranked C and above, who were already prepared to mobilize at any moment. Caught off guard, glanced aside and noticed that even the head joined them. The reminded everyone that he had announced the previous day his intention to remain stationed at the branch near the dungeon's entrance, needing to be close by to make swift decisions upon their return. He then instructed the group to proceed, but Abel requested a brief pause. A sense of unease about the first floor prompted Abel to ask Lynn to use her wind magic to survey the area. Agreeing, the door closed firmly behind them, sealing off access to the staircase. A man informs the group that the others have moved up to the top of the stairs and confirms that the entrance is now securely closed. He glances sideways, fear flickering in his eyes, as monstrous claws twist and crush the group beside him. Countless goblins began pouring through the halls by the entrance, filling the area with their overwhelming numbers. A fierce fight erupts as the goblin raises his voice, yelling at the heroes with intensity. She instructed the group to attack from a distance using magic and arrows, assuring them that the vanguard would shield the mages and archers from any incoming enemy spells or missiles. Arrows released by the heroes hit their marks, causing numerous foes to collapse as they advance. At the same time, inside the Adventurers Guild, grabs a megaphone and informs everyone that a massive surge has caused monsters to invade the city, and that permission for ranged assaults has just been granted. A line of archers stood poised on the dungeon gate walls, readying their arrows as offered a gentle reminder for everyone to drink water and keep themselves hydrated. Within the dungeon, Abel observed that the enemies appeared to be nothing more than goblins accompanied by a few archers, predicting that the upcoming fight would test their stamina and persistence. Acknowledged that overcoming these foes was necessary in order to advance toward the bosses deeper within. The warrior remarked that the opposition consisted solely of goblins for now, warning that they would continue to pour in relentlessly until the elusive general, who would not reveal himself without a struggle, was finally defeated. Not long afterward, a goblin mage made its entrance, prompting someone in the group to urgently warn everyone to watch out since magic attacks were on the way. A vigilant warrior noticed the nearby and quickly signaled for him to make his way toward the northern wall of the dungeon. At the same time, on the northern wall, numerous fighters make their way inside, preparing to confront the goblins directly in battle. Upon witnessing the situation, the questions in his mind whether the knights have already exhausted their supply of arrows. He then urges everyone to unite with the knights, believing that their combined strength will easily overcome the approaching goblin horde. Meanwhile, an earth mage starts to recite an incantation, calling upon the power of the earth to protect him as a shield. A sturdy stone barrier suddenly emerged before, shielding him from the incoming strikes. The mage loudly announced that the goblin's defeat was close, and hinted that more mages would soon join the battle. At that moment, swiftly sliced one of the creatures in two as it moved into the path of his spear. With fatigue weighing heavily on him, Abel drives his sword into the earth as a horde of goblins surrounds him. Warren, standing near the warrior, used his enormous shield to launch goblins skyward. The warrior remained close by his side, managed to bring down another goblin archer, and allowed herself a small, satisfied smile. She encouraged the group to endure for just a little while longer. As Abel watched, the fallen goblin before him started to fade, its life slipping away, while a distant sound gradually grew louder in the background. Came to a halt, his gaze fixed on the distant end of the first floor. Abel mirrored his action, pausing to look in the same direction. Beyond the body of the defeated goblin, 3 more goblins emerged into view. Each one appeared far bigger than the last. Everything appeared ordinary, yet Abel watched them with a sense of discomfort. As 3 goblin generals emerged, joining the ranks of countless goblins that had already been vanquished. Deeper within the dungeon, the presence of a goblin king was the only possible explanation. Reports had surfaced in the past about goblin kings. These powerful beings usually emerged once every several decades, leading vast armies of goblins and possessing enough strength to wipe out whole cities. Because it was already common knowledge that over 10,000 goblins lived within this dungeon, the presence of just one should not have come as a surprise to anyone. Despite the fact that no one had ever been born inside a dungeon before, Abel went on to explain that he truly did not understand the true strength of the Goblin King. Abel also expressed his desire to take down the 3 generals. Before the king arrived, he announced his plan. He would handle one task himself, assign another to the leader of the White Brigade, and leave the 3rd responsibility to the remaining groups. With a burst of speed, Abel lunges toward one of the goblin generals, his movements quick and purposeful. He strikes the goblin at close range, yet the creature barely reacts to the attack. A mage unleashed a fireball that streaked through the space, separating the 2 Abels. The beast forcefully ended the close-quarters fight. Abel put some space between himself and his opponent, pausing to consider his upcoming move. The goblin charged at Abel with ferocity, but Abel quickly moved aside, avoiding the attack with practiced agility. Working together, he began to plan their next move. Both had wide, eager smiles, the kind seen on those who truly enjoy the thrill of battle. The commander of the White Brigade launched into a swift, whirling strike aimed directly at one of the goblin generals. A moment passed before he realized that something unusual was happening behind the first group of 4. Abel observed the situation and realized the same thing. The creature urgently commanded everyone to take cover. In the next instant, a brilliant bolt of white lightning crashed down, engulfing the upper bodies of the 3 goblin generals. Meanwhile, the 2 warriors quickly crouched low, shielding their ears as the deafening lightning surged just above them. Immediately afterward, one of the group wonders aloud if the fearsome creature before them could be the Goblin King, as a terrifying monster emerges. They also questioned whether it had attempted to get rid of them together with its own generals. Abel wondered about the nature of the recent attack, questioning whether it had truly been magic. As he replayed the moment in his mind, he noticed that his opponent had simply moved an arm without reciting any spells. With this realization, Abel began to form his next plan. It would be safest to remain near him. He loudly announces that he and will confront the creature. As they approach the Goblin King, the warrior is caught off guard when the monster lunges at him. Quickly, he moves his sword to the side and Abel intercepts the Goblin King's attack, though the force behind the blow tests his strength. As Abel fights to hold his ground, notices a brief vulnerability and thrusts his spear into the creature's arm while it lunges at. The Goblin King reels from the White Brigade leader's assault, bellowing furiously at his opponents. Abel remains intensely focused on the monster. Together, Abel and launch a relentless series of powerful attacks, battling on with unwavering resolve. The monstrous creature seemed to be suffering greatly as it fought against the might of the 2 skilled fighters. During the chaos, Abel lost his footing and stumbled to the ground, angrily muttering under his breath as he hit the dirt. Seizing the moment when Abel falters, the Goblin King lunges forward, aiming to land a blow. Meanwhile, the warrior yells out, demanding end. The commander of the White Brigade charged at the warrior, shouting his name as he closed the distance. In response, Abel began to recite the incantation for his signature move, known as Absolute Shadow. The Goblin King pressed on relentlessly, his fierce determination driving him closer to the group of heroes. As the creature approached Abel, it prepared to strike with a powerful punch. Once the Goblin King was within range, the warrior executed his flawless piercing sword move, landing a direct hit on his opponent. While carrying out this attack, Abel struck the monster and shouted for it to make her move while he kept the creature restrained. From afar, and Warren observed the enormous beast that Abel was battling. Without hesitation, Abel began to recite the words for his ultimate shadow combat skill once more. In the next moment, the city appeared in the background, buffeted by gusts of wind and swirling dust caused by the force of Abel's attack. Back inside the dungeon, a wide, dark scorch mark was visible on the ground, and his face was filled with disbelief. The Goblin King stood nearby, suffering from a deep, shadowy wound. The creature sank to its knees before the mighty warrior, bowing its head in submission. The leader of the White Brigade walked up to Abel and noticed the creature kneeling, surrounded by a shadowy puddle. The hero stared in shock, unable to believe what was happening right in front of him. Inside the bustling tavern, a crowd gathered close, their laughter and raised mugs filling the air as they celebrated an event unknown to. The atmosphere buzzed with happiness as noticed entering and waved him over, eager for him to join the festivities. Made his way through the crowd, and Nils quickly announced his plan to eat enough food to last an entire week, just as greeted warmly. Clearly delighted, told that he had arrived just in time for the beginning of the party, assuring him that he could help himself to as much food and drink as he liked. Everyone from the guild had gathered together. A tempting dish brimming with food was set before the protagonist. Nils, ever upbeat, mentioned his own tardiness and encouraged to help himself to a mug and a plate from the side table, assuring him he could eat his fill. Still puzzled by the situation, eventually inquired about the reason for the festivities. The group shares that there was a powerful surge earlier that day, something the boy had heard about during the seminar. This event is rare, happening only every few years. It dawns on that the celebration around them is because they managed to get through the surge unharmed. Meanwhile, his mind drifts to the food, hoping he can get something to eat before the boy continues with his tale. As time passed, Nils began recounting Abel's impressive performance during the battle, emphasizing that Abel's expertise with a bow matched his swordsmanship, and that he nearly defeated the Goblin King single-handedly. The protagonist started to question why Abel had to face the Goblin King mostly on his own. Nils went on to clarify that delivered the decisive strike, but only because Abel had restrained the monster and was calling out for the others to attack. Pointed out that if Abel had been the one to fatally wound the king, the outcome could have been dire, and from the way it was described, the attack seemed to be a rare wind spell that ultimately brought down the Goblin King, who had been dozing. The protagonist remarked to himself that the name Bullet Rain had an impressive ring to it. Nils nodded in agreement, explaining that the attack unleashed dozens of invisible blades. He expressed his relief that none of the blades had struck anyone important. Suddenly, a voice pointed out that the sole reason he avoided getting struck was due to his skillful use of combat techniques. Abel suddenly materialized next to the boys, striking a confident, heroic stance. Curious, wondered aloud about the meaning of combat art, prompting the warrior to explain that it referred to a specific method of fighting. The technique known as absolute shadow, often favored by swordsmen, enables them to evade both magical and distance-based attacks. As observed its use, he couldn't help but admire how impressive the name sounded. Abel anticipated that the protagonist would mention his name. With a laugh, the protagonist pointed out that Nils had been admiring Abel's bravery during the fight. Meanwhile, the other boy looked away, his face turning red from embarrassment. The seasoned fighter explains how Nils and his companions played a crucial role, constantly racing to supply fresh arrows for the archers, and admits they would have been defeated without their help. Filled with pride, the young boy straightens his posture, doing his best to conceal the thrill bubbling inside him. Abel remarked that the group would have had a smoother victory if had joined them, then wondered aloud about whereabouts. The protagonist explained that had been at the library, expressed relief that he hadn't taken away Abel's chance to shine, prompting Abel to respond with annoyance and tell him to be quiet. And Rhea entered together, announcing that they had at last located Abel, explaining that they expected he would be with Rhea since his concern for the boy had been obvious. Abel, feeling awkward, quickly any special reason for being there, insisting he was merely mentioning how much smoother their fight could have gone if the hero had fought alongside them. Rhea then relayed a message from the guild master. He would be meeting the Margrave at noon the next day, and Abel was required to accompany him. Playfully mocked Abel, remarking that such a generous reward matched his impressive skills on the battlefield. Abel, ever modest, insisted that had been the one to strike the finishing blow. However, quickly interrupted, urging him not to avoid taking credit for his actions. She explains that her successful casting of the spell was possible only because he had used his sword to hold the goblin down. Turning toward while holding her sword, she explained that she had a question for him. She mentioned that Abel had claimed was able to create towering ice walls from afar, and she wanted to know if this ability was real. With a cheerful expression, the hero agreed and explained that he possessed the ability to form barriers reaching as high as 40 meters above his head. Eyes wide opened her mouth to speak, but before she could, explained that the beginning had been challenging for him and that reaching his current level required intense training. As she remained stunned, the protagonist shifted his gaze sideways and warned the others to halt their actions, cautioning cautioning them about the danger involved. A meaningless argument erupted among the group of young adults when an object fell to the ground, prompting them to request a cloth to wipe up the mess. 5 days had gone by since the Great Tide battle. On a busy street, Ammon noticed a group of 5 hooded figures passing him, and he immediately identified them as the research team. At the same time, Nils stood in front of the mission board at the guild's headquarters, disappointed to see it empty. Who was at his side offered an apology, explaining that in the past 2 days, every E and F rank mission had been claimed, and the purchasing department had requested a halt on issuing more for now. Nils, feeling uncomfortable, tried to assure that he understood the situation wasn't her fault, but rather the result of the purchasing department's decisions. Speaking a bit louder than necessary, he expressed. The boys quickly agree to take on the task, and remarks that the terms are favorable, calculates the cost and observes that it remains less expensive than purchasing the item outright. He mentions that, since the assignment doesn't come from the guild, it won't contribute to their ranking, but the group assures him that this isn't an issue. Set out for the abandoned mine, accompanied by all 3 of his friends. The hero had enough money of his own, so instead of taking the job himself, he decided to give his roommates a chance to earn some cash, preferring to let them work for it rather than simply giving it away. As the others set out to gather magic copper, he planned to hone his alchemy skills with supplies purchased from the city. Inside the northern bookstore, visitors would notice that the selection leaned towards specialized subjects, offering fewer general or wide-ranging books compared to what one might find in the southern bookstore. Began to move forward, heading in the direction of an unseen destination. A specially marked door stood as a barrier to the restricted archives, allowing entry solely to individuals granted permission by, or those holding the rank of B-class adventurer or above. Inside those archives, numerous documents and writings remained hidden from public view, among them advanced spells from every magical element classified as forbidden magic. After spending a while investigating, Lin concludes that the spell isn't actually included in the records. Still, she needs to make absolutely certain that no magic exists which could form ice barriers from afar. Within the Central Nations, every spell and its corresponding chant performed by mages, even those she had employed to overcome the Goblin King, was carefully recorded in official tomes. Not only were the incantations lengthy, but advanced magic also demanded a skilled and experienced mage. Otherwise, the spell could overwhelm and ultimately destroy the one attempting to use it. For this reason, those books remained inaccessible to most people. Nevertheless, she was unable to uncover any mention of the spells had been casting during battles. Magic users form spells by speaking special phrases, which bring about magical results. Those who possess the ability can use spells in this manner. With practice, they advance from simple spells to more complex and powerful ones. She reflected on a type of magic that existed without the need for spells, and as she thought of, she likened this pure magic to a water-based counterpart of a powerful fire mage. Renowned for casting powerful spells that amazed everyone, the fire mage possessed skills unmatched by others. She found it impossible to grasp how some managed to perform magic without chanting, and the idea of inventing entirely new spells baffled her even more. From the dimness behind, a woman emerged, remarking that considerable time had passed since their previous encounter. Began to pivot, curious about the person who had entered without a sound. Her eyes landed on a slender sword suspended at the newcomer's side. In that moment, realized she was looking at Sarah, the last remaining B-rank member of the Wind group in the city of Loon. Lin offered Sarah a warm smile and greeted her, as the 2 girls found themselves together in the quiet of the night. The person wondered aloud why Lin would be in such an unlikely location. Lin explained that she had been searching for information, but had come up empty-handed, then added that she had heard rumors about Sarah being sent on important assignments from the capital. She nodded in agreement, explaining that she had been gone but had returned the previous day. Before leaving, she bid farewell and noted that the librarian was expecting her. Lin, feeling exasperated, decides it would be best to move forward on her own. From the window of Room 10 in the Adventurers Guild dormitory, the courtyard and training grounds are clearly visible, giving the place a sense of belonging and comfort. While Mills and carried out the mission that had assigned them, the protagonist spent his time mixing ingredients and testing various mixtures, determined to develop a new antidote. After several attempts, he finally succeeded in creating his very first antidote. Just as he achieved this milestone, a sudden shout erupted nearby, interrupting his focus. Immediately stopped his work and glanced to the side, tension rising as he tried to figure out the source of the commotion. Outside, Dan from Room 1 could be seen standing up for a girl, insisting that she clearly did not appreciate what was happening and urging the others to leave her alone. Meanwhile, one of the men had a grip on the young woman, suggesting that he suspects that some knights are attempting to exploit a young woman who recently started her journey as an adventurer and appears to be about Ammon's age. And then he sees Dan rising to his feet. Close by, a group of men speculated that the girl must be a newcomer to the area, likely a struggling adventurer, and suggested she could benefit from their assistance if she agreed to spend the evening with them. As the girl screamed in protest and refused their offer, quietly wished he wouldn't have to step in, thinking there were plenty of places in the city where the men could seek amusement instead. Dan, however, shouted at the men, insisting that the girl had clearly said no and warning them that if they continued to harass her, they would regret it. One of the armored men turned his attention to Dan, demanding he repeat himself. Releasing the girl, the knight declared his intent to teach the adventurer. Given his past experiences with Dan, knew that any direct offer of assistance would be rejected, so he felt compelled to find a subtle way to help. Agreed with Abel's earlier remarks, finding genuinely fascinating. Meanwhile, grew curious about what Abel might have been telling others about him. The head of the White Brigade recounted how Abel had brought up's name repeatedly during the Great Tide celebration, often mentioning that everything would have gone more smoothly if had been there to help. The leader noted that Abel was not easily impressed, making it remarkable that he spoke so much about. He also realized that was responsible for ensuring the warrior's safe arrival in the city. Acknowledging the importance of the bull to Loon, he expressed deep gratitude that had helped save both the bull and the warrior. Just then, a woman appeared in the doorway to remind the leader that it was nearly time for their departure. The leader offered his thanks to once more and apologized, explaining that some time passed, and the scene shifted to the grand hall within the Adventurers Guild. It was unusual to find him eating by himself, someone observed. The protagonist explained that his 3 companions were currently away, carrying out a task at the deserted shopping mall. Believed that even if he joined Abel at the table, he would have to cover his own meal. In fact, he thought it made more sense for Abel, being the more experienced adventurer, to treat him instead. Abel, caught off guard by this suggestion, insisted he had no plans to spend money on wealthy newcomers to adventuring, then accused Abel of being a heartless companion and claimed Abel was making too much of the situation. The hero noticed the warrior sitting by himself at a table in the bustling Adventurers Guild, remarking that it was unusual to find him eating alone. Curious, the hero wondered about the absence of the warrior's teammates. Abel responded by explaining that being part of a group didn't require them to spend every moment together. Let out a soft laugh, showing that he understood the situation. He then admitted that he was aware of the reason Abel was by himself at that moment. Abel, ready to hear his explanation, encouraged him to share why he thought Abel was alone. The protagonist explains his intention to visit the red light district, prompting Abel to call him a fool while showing clear signs of anxiety. Abel quickly urges to keep such remarks to himself, warning that someone could be eavesdropping. In response, mentions that even walls can listen and doors can see. Abel admits he's unfamiliar with the idea of doors having eyes, and firmly denies any plans to go to the red light district. The protagonist, however, sees through Abel's denial and asserts that he knows the truth. Abel often spends time with a particular girl, and when someone teases him about it, he becomes flustered and insists there's nothing going on, urging the boy to be quiet. The other boy jokingly warns Abel that if he ever showed interest in Lin, everyone would start giving him unkind nicknames. Without thinking, Abel suddenly reveals that Lin is already with Warren, then quickly clamps a hand over his mouth, aware he has revealed something he shouldn't have. Observed that the two made a striking contrast, but believed that true affection could bridge any difference in height. Reflecting on the situation, the protagonist started to analyze the possibilities, and reasoned that if one girl was not the answer, then the other must be. He questioned Abel about whether he intended to pursue Rhea, causing Abel to become visibly embarrassed and insist that he stop the conversation. Meanwhile, Rhea reflected inwardly, feeling sympathy for Ido, who likely would never be able to share her emotions. At the same time, the protagonist realized that ever since arriving in, he had not experienced romantic or physical attraction toward anyone, and he found comfort in that realization. Wondered aloud if Abel was managing okay with just a single meal at night, prompting the warrior to respond that having 2 meals would actually be excessive for him. The hero explained that he would simply need to be a little more active, while Abel watched him with a puzzled expression. Mentioned that he would have to exercise more at night before going to sleep. Abel teased him by questioning whether he was secretly employed by the red light district. Rhea, grinning the suggestion. He claimed he could spend his time thwarting dishonest traders and redistributing their wealth to those in need, but Abel pointed out that such actions would still be considered theft, regardless of the intention. Realizing that Abel was not amused, the protagonist noted that the warrior seemed to lack a sense of humor and chose to end the playful banter. Abel then revealed that a researcher among them belonged to the royal family, and he warned that not every knight in the escort could be trusted. He explained that some of these knights were known to appear at the site after dark, and he expressed his desire to catch them in the act. Claimed to understand, but his uncertain expression told a different story. He wondered aloud how they would track down the knights. Abel assured him that the solution was easy. They would wander through the city and confront the knights if they spotted them stirring up trouble. The hero admitted that, unexpectedly, this plan seemed quite reliable. In the city of Loon, the full moon cast a bright glow over every corner, signaling the arrival of mag time. Inside the Adventurers Guild, a voice erupted in anger as a member demanded to know what kind of chaos was unfolding. The visitors arrived, insisting on taking all the food supplies from the guild and announcing their intention to enter the dungeon that very day, even going so far as to threaten the protective seal. As if that weren't enough, they demanded that the adventurers act as their personal bodyguards. The concluded his address by declaring that even jokes have their boundaries. After his words, an oppressive silence settled over the four individuals gathered in the room. Clive Staples, who held the position of president at the Central University of the Kingdom, explained that the king had chosen Count Harold Lawrence to lead the investigation, and that they possessed a letter giving them complete authority. He produced the letter and handed it to the who lifted it from the table to read. As he read the letter, the pointed out that it did require the guild to offer full support to the group, but insisted that he could not simply hand over all of the guild's food supplies, interrupting the other man just as he was about to express his gratitude. Clives turned to the and questioned whether he truly understood what it meant to accommodate someone. In response, the challenged Mr. President Clive Staples by asking if he himself grasped the meaning of the phrase as much as possible. At that moment, Arthur Court Mage Advisor intervened, urging both men to end their argument and reminding them that each of them held significant leadership roles within the kingdom. The advisor went on to say, pointed out that the group had no idea what dangers might be lurking within the dungeon, and warned that attempting to open it without proper knowledge could be deadly. In response, the other man reminded everyone that their research team had been assembled specifically for the purpose of investigating the dungeon. After a brief pause, he agreed to let them proceed, but only if they accepted full responsibility for any consequences and signed paperwork acknowledging the risks involved. Clives reacted with clear frustration at the stipulation, informed Clives that if he took issue with the condition, then the dungeon would remain sealed. Arthur reminded Clives that they had no other alternatives. He went on to assure that bringing in adventurers would be acceptable, since earning a living was still necessary. They nodded in agreement, explaining that the decision to accept or decline jobs would be left to each individual's judgment, though he cautioned them not to be careless. After a great tide, the mysteries within a dungeon remained unknown to everyone. There was a chance they would encounter completely unfamiliar things, so they needed to move forward carefully. Elsewhere in the city of Loon, approached Abel, expressing that he had something important to share. Decided to ask Abel about visiting the Northern Library, explaining that his search in the Southern Library had come up empty, and he was unsure if he would face any entry restrictions. Abel took the opportunity to outline some of the rules, assuring that his Black Adventurer entry card would grant him access without issue, though the restricted section would remain off-limits. Hearing about this restricted section caught off guard, sparking his curiosity. Abel then shifted the conversation, questioning about how fortunate he felt to have started as a D-rank adventurer in this particular city. At that point, stopped to wonder aloud about Abel's popularity, pointing out that Abel seemed to know everyone, as he was constantly exchanging greetings with. The hero signaled for Abel to remain silent while he focused intently on something, gesturing in its direction. He pointed out a group passing nearby, and informed the warrior that those four individuals had not shown up at Abel's welcome party. Let out a laugh, teasing that Abel might not be as well liked as he believed, while the warrior simply shrugged off any concern about popularity. Abel went on to clarify that Loon was unique among the central cities for having a dungeon, which attracted many adventurers from distant areas. Then remarked that Groot had seemed rather suspicious. Warrior claimed that nothing about the group appeared unusual to him. Meanwhile, one person within the group appeared to sense that someone was observing them and glanced over their shoulder. After some time, the hero wondered aloud if perhaps they had never been invited to the party at all. Abel explained that since they were newcomers, it was likely they hadn't received an invitation. Hearing this, felt a wave of relief and remarked to Abel that at least his reputation in the city wasn't suffering as much as he feared. The warrior, however, simply shrugged off the concern, showing no interest in his popularity. While continuing their conversation, they follow the odd group they noticed earlier into a narrow alleyway. Suddenly, the noise of a scuffle erupts, only to fade into silence moments later. Now standing over the defeated group sprawled at their feet, remarks that it wasn't fair for these people to attack simply because Abel attracts attention. The warrior suggests that the real issue is the hero's envy of Abel's popularity. However, the hero insists that, regardless of how others provoke him, responding with violence is never justified. As Abel began to check the pockets of the defeated men for anything useful, watched with clear discomfort, uneasy about the idea of taking their money. Abel calmly explained that he was only searching for their ID cards, not trying to steal. The warrior stumbled upon an intriguing object, noting its resemblance to an alchemy tool. Seeing this, the hero's excitement grew, expressing a clear desire to claim the item. The warrior stands firm, declining the request. Curious, inquires about the reason behind the refusal. Abel explains that the item is needed as proof. The card reveals that the individual's name is a C-rank adventurer registered with the Jakarta City Guild. Abel explained that served as the capital city of the Alliance, noting how unusual it was to see Alliance adventurers appearing nearby, which hinted that something odd might be happening. He suggested that they turn the captured men over to the guards. Meanwhile, made a lighthearted comment, teasing that Abel occasionally managed to do the right thing. Abel often claimed to act virtuously, yet the hero recalled hearing that Abel had been boasting to others about how much simpler the Great Surge could have been. If had attended, Abel's expression shifted to one of shock as he questioned how this information had been uncovered, stepped out of the inn, and made his way through the city streets with a composed demeanor. Despite his efforts to move unnoticed, an individual trailed him at a close distance. The individuals chasing after him move into place at his back, their hands reaching for their swords as they prepare to draw them. One of the knights announced that would finally face consequences for the embarrassment he had caused them earlier that day. The knight believed that no matter how powerful might be, he stood no chance against all of them together. As the knights advanced, their swords slid from their scabbards, glinting in the dim light as they approached the lone warrior, remained oblivious to the growing circle of armed men closing in around him, his weapon already put away. Sensing an unseen presence, he shut his eyes. Almost instantly, the knight sprang forward, launching an unexpected assault on. Suddenly, the strange paralysis lifts, leaving everyone confused about what just occurred. They soon discover that they are unable to move their bodies at all. One knight glances down and spots an object embedded in his leg, resembling a needle. In that tense moment, appears behind the knight and questions whether the knight truly believed he stood a chance of winning. Knight was stunned when he discovered a needle lodged in his head. The injury to his leg prevented him from moving forward. A woman remarked that Lord had overlooked the shocking events of the night, insisting that worthless people deserved to be destroyed completely. She extended her arms, and in response, the three knights were suddenly transformed into towering columns of flame before her. She pivoted and resumed her stride, matching her pace with as they walked together. Praised the mage for her outstanding work. The scene shifted back to the group of adventurers from where it became clear that one among them continued to approach. Regaining awareness, he slowly pushed himself upright, confusion swirling in his mind as he tried to piece together what had just occurred. It struck him how unbelievably powerful those two men had been. He acknowledges the sheer strength of the man wielding the crimson sword, yet he finds himself puzzled about the identity of the mage, reflecting that no one could have hoped to win against them. One of the men from the group appeared to spot something unusual close to their location. Observing the glow and rising smoke, he questioned internally whether there might be a fire in the vicinity. As the group continued on their way, one of them urged everyone to stand, remarking that everything had become chaotic and suggesting they should simply return to their rooms in the end. As the others struggled to their feet, groaning from their injuries, the person who appeared to be in charge was already on his way. He glanced back, urging the group to pick up the pace. When he turned to continue ahead, he suddenly found himself standing directly in front of who was approaching from the opposite direction. Caught sight of him through her peripheral vision, the man stopped in his tracks, instantly realizing that he was looking at the mage from the White Brigade. As she walks by, he begins to shake and quietly mutters an apology beneath his breath. The mage kept moving forward, leaving him rooted to the spot as she disappeared down the path. A while later, he cries out in frustration, wondering aloud what causes this city to be filled with monsters roaming its streets.
Lately, I've had a strong addiction to watching manhwa and manga recap videos. Every single day, I find myself binging one after another, losing hours and days doing absolutely nothing productive. And honestly, it's getting out of hand. So, maybe we can make these viral videos too. I mean, look at the views, the growth, the community these creators are building. It looks simple, right? But that's a trap. You go down this endless rabbit hole, spending money, losing sleep, hiring editors and writers from Fiverr and Upwork, and still feel like you've been robbed. Because don't forget how emotional the YouTube algorithm can be with making videos go viral. It's unpredictable, especially when the market's saturated, competition's relentless, and somehow other creators are dropping 10-hour videos daily while you're stuck trying to finish one. That's when I realized something had to change. So, I built the solution, the Webtoon Narrative Suite, a complete one-click system that handles everything from cropping, script narration, text-to-speech, image processing, and full video generation in one smooth process. Save money, reduce hours of work, and have a tool that only gives you straight results. Click on the link down below and experience it for yourself. And if you want even more tools to supercharge your YouTube recap journey, visit my Ko-Fi and Patreon pages where I drop weekly new tools designed to keep you ahead as AI continues to steal our jobs. So tap in now before you get left behind.